Chapter 1504. Gu Xingze raised his hand and took another deep puff of the cigarette. However, this mouthful, perhaps because he inhaled too quickly, he choked fiercely. He suddenly covered his face and let out a heart-wrenching cough. Cough, cough, cough. It was heart-wrenching. Amidst his violent coughing, his fingers loosened and the cigarette fell on the carpet. The smell of burnt carpet instantly filled the air. Qin Zhou frowned, quickly turned on the floor lamp, and walked over. Gu Xingze's wet hair was exposed under the light. He looked up in shock. When he saw Qin Zhou, his eyes dimmed slightly. Qin Zhou walked to his side and sat down. He looked at him angrily, only to see that his body was dripping wet, especially his hair. It was as if he had just been fished out of a bathtub. He was only wearing a bathrobe, and his hair was dripping wet. It was as if he hadn't wiped it, and the ends of his hair were still dripping with water. Qin Zhou's heart ached when he saw this. How did this man in front of him become so decadent? In the past, Gu Xingze had always been high and mighty. He was cold, arrogant, and inviolable, like a king. He would never show such a weak side. Qin Zhou could not help but feel heartbroken. At the same time, he could not understand. Xingze, how did you become like this? Ever since he terminated his contract with Gu Xingze and became Yun Shishir's manager, Gu Xingze did not hire another manager. He had his own studio. Everything in his acting career was managed by his team. Gu Xingze opened his eyes lazily and did not say a word. He grabbed the cigarette box on the table and put a cigarette in his mouth. He was about to light it. Qin Zhou quickly snatched the cigarette from his mouth and said angrily, "How many cigarettes have you smoked? Why are you still smoking?" As he spoke, he glanced at the ashtray. The ashtray was full of cigarette butts. How many cigarettes had this guy smoked without saying a word? Qin Zhou said angrily, "Your new album will start recording soon. Don't you want your voice anymore?" Gu Xingze said in a low voice, "Give it to me. Don't smoke anymore." Qin Zhou ordered and confiscated the cigarette box. Gu Xingze watched his movements, but did not stop him too forcefully. He closed his eyes and let his body sink into the sofa, but his face was filled with unconcealable loneliness. Qin Zhou sat down across from him and remained silent for a long time. After what seemed like a century of dead silence, Gu Xingze suddenly spoke slowly. "What should I do if I fall in love with someone I shouldn't?" Perhaps it was because of the cigarette, but his voice was a little hoarse and obscure. It was low and broken, revealing a little powerlessness and confusion. Qin Zhou had never seen him so fragile. He moved his lips and took a deep look at Gu Xingze, but said almost cruelly, "Then don't love." Gu Xingze was confused. Qin Zhou forced himself to say coldly and heartlessly, "Don't think about it, don't think about it, don't look at it, and don't have any wild hopes." Gu Xingze stopped talking and looked down expressionlessly. Qin Zhou said coldly, "Cut off all the feelings you shouldn't have." "Cut off all the feelings?" Gu Xingze said indifferently, "If it's that simple, it's not a bad thing." Qin Zhou was speechless. Gu Xingze said unwillingly, "But I want her." "Is it Xianxia?" Qin Zhou held his forehead helplessly. "There are so many women you don't want." "By her feeling." Gu Xingze uttered these two words after a long pause. Chapter 1505. However, Qin Zhou was puzzled. He really couldn't understand why Xingze was so infatuated with Yun Shishir. "How do you feel?" Qin Zhou asked. Xingze narrowed his eyes as if he was smiling. "She gives me a warm feeling." "Warm? Living with her will definitely make you feel at home." Gu Xingze paused and said, "What I want, no one can give me except her. Don't let your imagination run wild. You'll meet someone more suitable." Qin Zhou stood up and held his shoulders. He advised in a low voice, "Actually, Xingze, you deserve to meet someone more suitable. All this time, you've been too closed off and unwilling to come into contact with the outside world. You immersed yourself in work and numbed yourself. Actually, you can find someone more suitable for you." Gu Xingze frowned but didn't say anything in the end. Qin Zhou sighed. Not long after his debut, he started to manage Gu Xingze. Gu Xingze had been in the industry for 10 years. He had been in the industry for 11 years. In these 10 years, he couldn't tell if it was him who made Gu Xingze or Gu Xingze who made him. After taking care of him for 10 years, Qin Zhou's heart ached for Xingze. When he first met Xingze, it was during a high-level meeting. Xingze entered the entertainment industry because he was once spotted by a talent scout on the streets of America. He was invited to the company and was coaxed into signing a contract. Strictly speaking, Qin Zhou was his second manager. At that time, Qin Zhou was just 20 years old. He was promoted from an assistant to a manager and was considered a greenhorn. When he first met Gu Xingze, his first impression was that the young man had an arrogant temperament. He sat at the table with a few executives surrounding him. They were all smiling and looking at him as if he was a money tree. However, he didn't say a word. His expression was cold and there was no emotion in his eyes. At that time, the domestic entertainment industry wasn't at its peak. At that time, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japanese, and Korean idols were very popular. Gu Xingze was like a piece of high-quality jade. Even though he hadn't been carved, he was still natural. He was the kind of person who would be attracted by his handsome appearance at a glance. He had unlimited potential. However, it wasn't until he got to know him better that he understood that this youth's coldness seeped into his bones. He was the illegitimate son of the Gu family in the capital. He had the blood of the Gu family, but he was not acknowledged by the Gu family. When he was very young, he was exiled abroad and lived alone. The reason why Gu Xingze was exiled was because he was overseas and had nothing except for his expensive living expenses. There was no affection, no family, no friends. His mother had left him a long time ago. Therefore, it could be said that Gu Xingze had always been alone. Therefore, the first time they met, Qin Zhou saw a strong sense of loneliness and melancholy in his eyes, as well as a distant aura that was difficult to get close to. He was usually a man of few words. It was only when he was on stage that he forced a smile as if he was wearing a mask. She was blessed with exceptional beauty and was sought after by her fans. Her first album was a whirlwind and she became famous overnight. Ever since his debut, Gu Xingze had been a rare, high-quality idol in the entertainment industry. He was immune to any rumors. The entertainment industry was a big dye vat. No matter who stepped into it, they would be tainted. The relationships between men and women in the circle were very messy. There are always these chaotic parties. Chapter 1506. The company, home, 2 points, 1 line. Other than that, he had to rush for work and fly all over the world. Yun Shirshir was probably the only woman he cared about. Was it because Shirshir gave him the feeling of home? Qin Zhou immediately understood. Yun Shirshir did have a warm charm. She did not speak much, but when she smiled, she seemed to be able to give people endless strength. When he was with her, he felt very at ease, very steady, and very calm. Indeed, there was the warmth of a family. But this woman was the only one he could not touch no matter what. Xingze, you should be rational. Qin Zhou said earnestly, I also like Shirshir a lot, but you have to remember that this is not a woman you should touch. Remember, this is not a woman you should touch. Gu Xingze closed his eyes deeply. Qin Zhou said to him as if he was bewitching him, cut off these feelings that you should not have. Xingze, listen to my advice. Mu Yaja is not someone you can afford to offend. Even if Gu Xingze suddenly raised his voice and interrupted him. His handsome eyes suddenly opened, revealing a sense of ambition and desire that he had never had before. Even if I become the head of the Gu family? Qin Zhou was stunned, not understanding the meaning behind his words. Is it because of Mu Yaja's status as Firen? Or is it because the Mu family is so powerful that I, as an artist, cannot compete with them? Gu Xingze's tone suddenly became a little agitated. He suddenly leaned forward and grabbed Qin Zhou's collar tightly. Then, if I replace my brother and become the head of the Gu family, will this status be enough to compete with him? Qin Zhou quickly covered his mouth. Don't say such dangerous things. He paused and suddenly lowered his voice. Don't forget that the Gu family has assigned people to watch over you 24/7. What if the room is bugged and Gu Jinglian hears what you said? His voice stopped abruptly, but he didn't continue speaking. Gu Xingze's mouth was covered, but his face was calm and there was no fear in his eyes. He just stared at him coldly. Qin Zhou's heart skipped a beat. Gu Xingza's bold words still echoed in his ears. If I become the head of the Gu family, will this identity be enough to go against him? Was he crazy? In order to snatch a woman from Mu Yaja, he didn't hesitate to compete with Gu Jinglian for the position of the head of the family. Was he crazy? Qin Zhou suddenly asked, "How much do you love her? How much do you love that woman? Don't you care? She and Mu Yaja have 2 children." Gu Xingza remained silent. Qin Zhou continued, 7 years ago, the Mu family hired a girl with a clean background to be a surrogate mother for the Mu family and gave birth to 2 children. And I've already found out that this girl is Yun Shirshir. You really don't mind? Why should I mind? Gu Xingza retorted coldly. Qin Zhou was stunned. I like her. I don't care about the past. Qin Zhou said, yes, you don't care. You're with her, but what about the 2 children? Gu Xingza was silent for a while. Suddenly, he said very seriously, I will be a qualified father for them. Qin Zhou couldn't believe it. Are you crazy? Yes, I'm crazy. Chapter 1507. You're crazy. Qin Zhou widened his eyes in disbelief. Is she worth it? Is she worth it? Gu Xingza stared at him with determination. She's worth it. Qin Zhou was stunned and choked on his words. Gu Xingza clenched his fists. Under the moonlight, his handsome face looked determined. I want to give her the happiest life. He wanted to give Shirshir the happiest life. Even if you have to sacrifice your life for her? Qin Zhou frowned with a complicated expression. Yes. It was a simple word, but there was no hesitation. Gu Xingza's eyes were unprecedentedly determined. In the past, he rarely took the initiative. Initially, he had hidden his feelings for Yun Shirshir deep in his heart because he did not want his feelings to burden her. If you love someone, you should not be conservative, but you should not bring trouble to that person. But now, he did not think so. Especially when he saw the scene on television where Mu Yaja held Yun Shirshir in his arms as they walked down the red carpet, he could not take it lying down. He was not willing to give in. He was not willing to give up the woman he loved to someone else. Gu Xingza walked to the rubbish bin and bent down slightly. He picked up the bouquet of lilies in the bin and held it in his hands. These were the flowers he had intended to give her. Qin Zhou stared at his proud back view. His expression was complicated, but there was also a trace of helplessness. He knew Xingza well. Once he was stubborn, he was hopeless. He could not help but worry for him. Xingza, have you thought it through? Gu Xingza's back was facing him. He said in a low voice, yes. I want to get Shirshir back. Qin Zhou said, have you ever thought that she doesn't love you? What will you do? Gu Xingza heard this and turned around. His lips curled into an enchanting smile. No, I will make her fall in love with me. After the banquet ended, Yun Shirshir searched the venue but did not find Qin Zhou and Gu Xingza. She could not help but feel puzzled. At the same time, she felt a little empty in her heart. Why wasn't Gu Xingza at the banquet? She did not see him today. Could it be that he did not attend? Did something happen? She was actually a little worried. Originally, Gu Xingza had invited her to walk the red carpet with him, and she had agreed. But now that she had broken her promise, she could not help but feel a little guilty. When she dialed Qin Zhou's number, she couldn't get through either. Mu Yaja hugged her and asked, who are you looking for? Yun Shirshir turned around, and the panic in her eyes disappeared. She immediately replied, I'm looking for Qin Zhou. Why are you looking for him? I'm checking on you. Yun Shirshir glanced at him. Why did it sound like an interrogation? But can't I ask? Mu Yaja pretended to be unhappy and said, it's so late. He should be back at the hotel. Then he should have told me. I've already greeted him. What? Mu Yaja leaned close to her ear and said ambiguously, I told him that you are mine tonight. Hey. Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth. She was a little angry at him for spouting nonsense. She could not help but glare at him. Why did you say that? It will cause a misunderstanding. Mu Yaja suddenly lowered his head and gave her a fierce peck on the lips. There was a hint of displeasure in it. Misunderstanding what? Yun Shirshir was at a loss for words. The chauffeur arrived in the car. He hugged her and used one arm to stabilize her weight. He carried her into the car. As soon as they got into the car, he impatiently covered her lips again. Chapter 1508. Mu Yaja raised the partition, separating the driver's seat from the back seat. At the same time, he trapped her in his arms and kissed her passionately. In front of him, she was no match for him at all. She met his aggressive kiss with difficulty, but for a moment, she was so frightened by his ferocious strength that she did not know what to do. In just a short while, she was dizzy from his kiss and turned into a puddle of spring water in his arms. She was completely powerless to resist and was no match for his attack. As her consciousness drifted away, he hugged her and sat her in his arms. His long legs supported all of her weight as he hugged her back and continued this deep kiss. Xianxia was so pitiful that she was in a daze from his kiss. She closed her eyes and felt that the man in front of her would have turned into a flood and mercilessly devoured her in the next second if they were not still in the car. This kiss was not enough for him to taste her beauty. He went so far as to put his hand under her skirt. Xianxia was at a loss for words. Her face was as hot as blood. "Don't," she lowered her voice and begged pitifully. Hearing her begging, Mu Yaja opened his handsome eyes and stopped her. "What? Hey, we're still in the car." The more Xianxia spoke, the redder her face became. "Don't be like this." "Don't what?" Mu Yaja mischievously tempted her to continue speaking. Xianxia's face was so red that she could not speak. She wanted to say that they were still in the car. Could he be a little more cautious and not be like a hungry wolf? Mu Yaja lifted her chin and his gaze fell on her beautiful face with simple makeup. His fingertips gently rubbed those alluring lips. Originally, her lips were smeared with a layer of bright red lipstick. However, after a passionate kiss, the color of her lips had already faded and returned to their original pink color. However, it was such a natural cherry blossom pink color that it was extremely easy to arouse his desire to ruthlessly ravage her. "Kiss me." His words were not to be defied. Xianxia bit her lips hard, but she was too ashamed to obey his orders. Mu Yaja saw her hesitation, and his eyes burned with passion again. When Xianxia saw this, she was afraid that he would go berserk, so she ignored everything else and held his handsome face with her small hands, clumsily pressing her lips against his. She carefully licked and kissed him, the tip of her tongue delicately tracing the shape of his lips. Her inexperienced kissing skills made him unable to be satisfied. Kissing like this, there was no way to enjoy himself to the fullest. What a stupid woman. She didn't know how to kiss at all. He bit her lips unhappily, causing her to cry out in surprise. However, in the end he still managed to hold himself back. Mu Yaja fiercely restrained himself and allowed her to kiss him clumsily. Her small hands held his face and kissed him sincerely and seriously. He couldn't bear to interrupt her. Stupid woman. As he hugged her, he felt that every minute and every second that passed was an indescribable torture. Especially when her exquisite figure was intimately snuggled up to him, it was torture in disguise. Mu Yaja gritted his teeth as fine sweat seeped out of his temples. The car arrived at the entrance of the hotel. Chapter 1509. Mu Yaja hugged her waist and said, "Get off the car." At this moment, Xianxia's body was slightly limp. That lingering kiss earlier had almost suffocated her. Hence, when he hugged her waist, he quickly noticed that something was wrong with her body. Looking at her weak and boneless figure as she fell into his arms, Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows slightly and there was a teasing and playful look in his eyes. "Why, can't walk anymore?" No matter how one looked at it, the curve of his lips was playful and full of evil. Xianxia couldn't help but feel annoyed, and at the same time, she hated this man's evil smile as she stared at him in annoyance, feeling extremely embarrassed. She tugged at his sleeve and stammered, "That... my legs are a little numb." Mu Yaja curled his lips slightly, but there was an ambiguous flame in his eyes which landed on her face. So much so that Xianxia felt even more embarrassed from his deep gaze. This man... really... this man was too evil. She was so embarrassed, and wasn't the main culprit behind all of this because of him? Mu Yaja casually admired her embarrassment and didn't pull her or hug her. He just watched as she slowly got off the car, and with his long arms, he pulled her into his embrace. He couldn't help but kiss her earlobe as his heart was getting more and more anxious for her. However, he still forcefully endured it, and in his voice, there was a trace of unusual oppression and obscurity. "Little thing, is this all you've gotten?" Xianxia was even more embarrassed and angry as she raised her hand and hammered his chest. Mu Yaja didn't even bother to dodge as he allowed her to punch him. To him, this little fellow's fist strength was really insignificant, and it was just like scratching an itch. He stretched out his long arm and firmly supported her. His right arm exerted a little force, and her entire body was wrapped in his embrace. Compared to his 188 body, she was just too petite. Adding on to the fact that she was skinny, with one hand holding her, it was as if he was holding a large cloth doll. She didn't see any strained expression on his face as he hugged her like this without any effort at all. Being hugged by him like this, she felt like a little child. Xianxia's face was full of charm, and when she raised her head to look at him, she could only see the side of his handsome face, which was incomparably handsome, and at the same time, it revealed a bone-deep arrogance. This man's strength had already reached a terrifying stage. Although she was skinny, she was still 48 kilograms, and he was able to steadily support her with one arm, which was really shocking. When Mu Yaja carried her into the hotel in such a strange way, the few waiters in the lobby were all stunned as they looked on helplessly. While they were shocked, they couldn't help but sigh at this man's astonishing arm strength. Some female staff were shocked, and at the same time, they also felt envious. Xianxia probably didn't know. However, when the others saw Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her, that pair of doting eyes, just one look and they felt that their hearts were about to melt. They stared at this scene without blinking. The man was incomparably handsome and well-dressed, while the woman was petite and delicate. Her delicate features revealed the charm of an Eastern classic. Chapter 1510. No matter how one looked at it, the two of them looked so compatible. Especially when Mu Yaja hugged the woman in his arms like she was a rag doll. Many people were envious and jealous. What was the happiest thing in a relationship? It was probably when a man doted on a woman like a princess and held her in the palm of his hand like a child. "Hey!" Xianxia received the strange looks that were cast at her. She couldn't help but gently tug at Mu Yaja's lapel and said in embarrassment, "Put me down. I can walk on my own now." She kept feeling that she was being hugged by him like a child. The staff in the hotel looked at her with surprise and envy, which made her feel very uncomfortable. She only felt that it was weird. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows, but he didn't understand the awkwardness in her heart. "I'm not putting you down." Huh. He liked hugging her like this. He liked the feeling of her quietly nestling in his arms or fooling around. The elevator door opened, and he carried her into the elevator. He pressed the button for the floor. In the narrow space, there were only the two of them. Xianxia lowered her head and nestled in his chest. However, she could feel Mu Yaja's scorching gaze still on her body. It was incomparably hot. She only felt that her exposed skin was about to be burned deeply by this scorching gaze. The floor jumped over the 8th floor and headed towards the 15th floor. The suite he booked was on the 15th floor. When the elevator door opened, Mu Yaja carried her and walked towards the room. He took out his key card and swiped it to enter the room. Mu Yaja put her down and casually locked the door. Xianxia was wearing 8-centimeter high heels. When she landed, she was caught off guard. She lost her balance and almost fell. However, the man quickly grabbed her arm and helped her up easily. "Why are you so clumsy?" He didn't hide the teasing and ridicule in his words. When the sound of the door being locked was heard, Xianxia didn't even have time to react. She felt the man's warm palm push her. Then that solid and tall body covered her. While she was still in a daze, her body was pressed against the door by him. When she felt the incredible heat coming from his body, she instantly turned pale. "Mu Yaja!" She pushed him in embarrassment. How did this man turn from a well-dressed business tycoon into a wild beast the moment he entered the room? Along the way, she felt the scorching gaze in his eyes. Her heart was uneasy, But this man was too. They had just entered the door and were still at the entrance, but he seemed to be a little impatient. Mu Yaja pressed her down and lowered his head. No matter how elegant a man was, he wouldn't pretend to be a gentleman at this moment. He admitted that he couldn't wait to have her. Thus, he lowered his head and kissed her on the lips. His aggressive stance was completely on par with the ferocious strength from before. He didn't give her any room to resist at all, and he took her shock and anger into his mouth. In this aspect, men had always held the absolute initiative. No man liked to dilly-dally and oppress himself when it came to matters of the heart. He casually took off his suit jacket. He was like a teenager who had tasted forbidden fruit for the first time. He wanted to taste her. Chapter 15:11. Other than her, he had never touched any other woman. However, out of so many women, he could not resist her. He could not get enough of kissing and tasting. On the way back to the hotel and even on the way back while carrying her, he pretended to be calm and looked at her. However, in his mind, he had already thought of several angles and positions. He had even planned out what position he should change to tonight so that he could have her without restraint. In this world, it seemed that she was the only one who could fit him perfectly. Just thinking about it made it hard for him to control himself. However, she had a conservative personality, so he endured until the moment they entered the room. He could not control himself for one more second. Pressing down on her, he crazily pulled her into his embrace. He wished he could rub this tormenting little thing into his bones and blood. He wished the two of them could become one. Only then would he be able to extinguish the raging flames in his heart. Even though he did not leave her for a moment, he still missed the pleasure of devouring her body. However, this little thing's stamina was too weak. After kissing her a few times in the car, she was already in a daze. How could this be? To him, that little bit of kissing was just an appetizer. He was greedy and could not satisfy his hunger at all. However, this was all she could do. Xianxia could only feel the world spinning around her. His kiss was ferocious. With his arms around her waist, he spun her around and brought her to the sofa in the living room. In the dark, he pressed her down on the sofa and tasted her sweet breath without restraint. So beautiful! So sweet! He could not taste enough of her sweetness. Xianxia was a little afraid of him. The man in front of her was very different from the elegant gentleman at the banquet earlier. At the banquet, he was arrogant, elegant, and courteous. However, at this moment, the man in front of her was more like a ferocious beast that had accurately targeted its prey. His gaze was burning as if she would be eaten alive in the next second. Hey, stop for a moment. Xianxia pushed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. What's wrong? Let's take a shower first, okay? She spoke softly as if she was begging him to be merciful. She wasn't ready yet. If he had been a little gentler, she wouldn't have been so frightened. But who was Mu Yaja? How could he be so easily dismissed? How could he not tell that she was just brushing him off? It seemed that this little woman still hadn't adapted to her style. However, if this kind of thing was suppressed, it would inevitably not be enough fun. Especially at this moment, under the moonlight, the way she looked limp in his arms. Her cheeks were tender and rosy, like a delicate flower bud, bashful and waiting to bloom. It was as if he had fallen into a hopeless demon. How could he control himself? After this, I'll go wash up. After he finished speaking, he greedily kissed those lips that were as sweet as a peach, and he felt the flames in his body ignite. He stopped suppressing himself and possessed her. Xianxia let out a muffled groan. She was frightened by his overbearing force. Her face was incomparably red as she bit her lips. However, she still could not help but let out a low pleading sound. This man was too vile. Chapter 15:12. After a brief lull in the battle that lasted for an hour, the man buried his head in her neck and breathed freely. He felt incomparably refreshed after venting all of his desires. Xianxia closed her eyes as her chest heaved up and down. She was so weak that she couldn't even lift her eyelids. The man's powerful and sexy panting kept ringing in her ears. Her small hands were on his shoulders, and her fingertips were slightly clenched. Mu Yaja raised his head to look at the woman in his arms. She was sweating profusely and her clothes were sticky. After a battle, she was exhausted. Her expensive dress was torn into pieces by the man and thrown to the side mercilessly. Yun Shirshir nestled in his arms tiredly, but she couldn't muster any strength. "Go take a shower," Mu Yaja said in a deep voice. However, he only said half of what he wanted to say. The second half was, "Continue after you're done." Yun Shirshir nodded in confusion. She looked at the man in front of her who had restrained his fierce aura and felt relieved. She was elated at the thought of being able to lie on a warm bed and rest after a comfortable bath. However, at this moment, she was like Little Red Riding Hood in a fairy tale. She didn't know that a big hungry wolf was silently hiding his tail behind his back and not showing it to her. After all, how could a man who had been suppressed for so long be so easy to get rid of? Mu Yaja carried Yun Shirshir into the bathroom. The room he booked was a presidential suite. Just the bathroom alone was more than 20 square meters. The bathtub was big enough for 2 people to lie down in, and it was big enough for the 2 of them to have sex with each other. He turned on the shower and held her in his arms as he carefully massaged her thighs. Yun Shirshir blushed beyond reason. This man, how did he know that her thighs were so sore at this moment? However, she couldn't help but admire Mu Yaja's attentiveness. Usually, after sex, he would pay attention to her movements when she got out of bed. He always felt that her thighs were a little uncomfortable and her walking posture was a little unnatural. He seriously looked up some information in this regard. Yun Shirshir could not help feeling satisfied. She nestled in his arms and allowed him to knead and pinch her as she fell into a sweet sleep. Just as the bathtub was filled with water, the doorbell suddenly rang. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows suspiciously. He didn't want to pay attention to it, but the person outside the door saw that no one was paying attention and rang the doorbell even more impatiently. Yun Shirshir was awakened by the doorbell. She looked up and opened her eyes in confusion. "Who's ringing the doorbell?" "I'll go take a look." Mu Yaja knitted his brows in displeasure. He got up, put on a bathrobe, tied it up, and walked out of the door. He walked to the entrance, and as soon as he opened the door, he was stunned. He saw Lin Ji standing outside the door. When she saw him open the door, she couldn't help but blush. There was a hint of wanting to say something. Mu Yaja frowned slightly and sized her up. He saw that she was wearing silk pajamas that were almost transparent. She stood shyly outside the door with her head lowered and her hands clutching the hem of her skirt. She looked a little shy and timid. His gaze suddenly noticed something strange. He glanced at her chest and saw that her full chest didn't seem to be covered by the pajamas. Through the material of the pajamas, he could see everything inside. Chapter 15:13. Lin Ji had returned to the hotel early after the banquet. She was ambitious and had been preparing for tonight's event for a long time. When she saw Mu Yaja at Louis Vuitton's studio, she was stunned. Mu Yaja was the biggest boss behind Huanyu. He held the largest share of Huanyu's shares and was the boss of Huanyu. He could also be said to be the emperor who controlled the entertainment industry. However, as the successor of Mu Yaja, he was used to keeping a low profile and rarely exposed himself to the limelight. Everyone thought that he would be an ordinary man. However, when Lin Ji saw this mysterious business tycoon with her own eyes, she was shocked. Oh my God! What a handsome and cool man. He completely shattered her original impression of this man. He was tall and slender, with an imposing aura. His handsome features were exquisite, and his perfect and elegant temperament crushed all the little fresh meats in the entertainment industry. He was so handsome. If he was in the entertainment industry, he would definitely gain countless fans. However, this man was a business tycoon, an elite of the empire. He held the vast Mu Empire in his hands and was incomparably honorable. A man like this, no matter what kind of woman, would flock to him like a flock of ducks. Was Mu Yaja Yun Shirshir's sugar daddy? Lin Ji could not help but be suspicious. After connecting the dots, she was certain of this idea. Mu Yaja must be Yun Shirshir's backer. Otherwise, how could Yun Shirshir get so many resources when she just debuted? Even if her manager was Qin Zhou, these resources were too generous. So many people could only dream of it. At first, she felt indignant. How could Yun Shirshir get to hook up with such a handsome, rich and powerful sugar daddy like Mu Yaja? When she thought about it again, the first person she slept with when she debuted was an elderly investor. When she thought about it, she instantly felt that it was quite unfair. Therefore, Linji made up her mind to snatch Muyaja, this big shot, from Yun Shishir's hands. She hurried back to the hotel from the banquet. The hotel she was staying at was different from the one Muyaja was staying at. Linji racked her brains and finally found out the hotel Muyaja was staying at. She packed her luggage and hurried over. Muyaja had already booked a luxurious suite downstairs from the presidential suite. She specially redid her makeup and deliberately imitated Yun Shishir's makeup. It was clear and beautiful, light and delicate. Muyaja took a fancy to Yun Shishir because he liked Yun Shishir's aesthetic style. Pure, immature, and even like a young student. These days, the big bosses in the circle all liked this kind of taste. Thus, Lin Ji imitated Yun Shishir's dressing and took off all her clothes except for a silk nightgown. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself in the mirror. The silk nightgown was extremely light and thin. Under the light, one could easily see the outline of her body wrapped in the nightgown through the fabric. It was a little ambiguous. Lin Ji was very pleased with herself. She purposely dressed so sexy and flirtatious. She didn't believe that Muyaja wouldn't take the bait when she sent herself to his door like this. Lin Ji's ambition was huge. She fantasized about seducing Muyaja. After she took this man for herself, Yun Shishir would be mercilessly kicked away. Chapter 15-14. At that time, all she had to do was think about how to get close to him, coax him, and make this sugar daddy happy. When the time came, she would be able to marry into a rich family in glory. That was the direction she should be working towards. There were so many female celebrities in the entertainment industry. How many of them entered the industry purely because of their passion for acting? Most of them used acting as a springboard to fame. Once they gained some fame, they would have the opportunity to enter the upper class and interact with the aristocrats. Marrying into a rich family was their ultimate goal. Lin Ji was no exception. Her family was not well off since she was young. Perhaps she was afraid of being poor, so she had a strong desire for material things and power. To her, in marriage, love was dispensable. Material things were the only thing that mattered. Therefore, marrying into a rich family was her greatest wish. When Lin Ji arrived, she was fantasizing that if her plan was successful and she could gain Muyaja's favor, it would be best if she could kick Yun Shishir out of the picture. Then she would be able to flaunt in front of Yun Shishir. According to the rumors, only one of the gowns Yun Shishir wore at the Fashion Week was provided by Louis Vuitton. No one knew where the rest came from. Could it be that she had bought them herself? They must have been given to her by Muyaja. Whether it was the ink-style gown or the Cheongsam gown that stole the limelight at the banquet, Muyaja had probably bought them at a high price for her to wear. What a generous gift! Muyaja was really generous when it came to her. Lin Ji's heart was filled with envy. In her heart, she yearned for Muyaja even more. If one day she could rise to the top, that would be amazing. The moment the door opened, Lin Ji saw Muyaja standing in the doorway. He was wearing a black bathrobe. It seemed that he had just come out of the bathroom. His entire body was dripping wet, and his hair was slightly messy and slanted. It covered his brows and left a deep shadow on his eyelids. Fine droplets of water dripped from the ends of his hair. It was obvious that he had just come out of the bathtub. Lin Ji's heart skipped a beat, and her face turned red. This was not an act. She was really mesmerized by Muyaja's handsome face. For a moment, she had completely forgotten the lines that she had prepared over and over again. She had forgotten how to open her mouth at that moment. She looked down and saw the man's slightly open chest. His chest was exposed to the air. His muscles were well defined, and there were water droplets on them. His sexy muscles stretched all the way down. Damn it, he was so charming. Lin Ji lost control of herself for a moment. Her eyes were fixed on him, and she couldn't look away. Oh my God. Looking at this man up close, he was even more handsome than when she had first seen him from a few meters away. For the first time in her life, she was almost suffocated by a man's beauty. A man like this was definitely a godlike existence. Lin Ji was so mesmerized that she forgot how to be jealous of Yun Shishir. She only wanted to take Mu Yaja down. She must have this man in her pocket. Even if she had to spend the rest of her life, she must tame him. Chapter 15:15. He blocked the door with his tall body, as if he had no intention of letting her pass. He knew very well what this woman's intentions were and what her goal was. As the big boss of Huanyu, he had met many women who overestimated themselves. They thought that they were beautiful and sent themselves to his door. In the past, he had to fly to other cities for business. Some investors saw the opportunity and even used unscrupulous means to send beauties to his bed. They were all carefully selected and were 1 in a million beauties. However, he was cold and indifferent. At that time, he was in the prime of his life, but he actually rejected these beauties who sent themselves to his door. There was once an investor who was so angry that he had internal bleeding. In order to cooperate with him, they specially selected an 18-year-old model from the young model circle. They stripped her naked and sent her to his bed, but he actually chased her out of the door. That young model was naked and sobbing outside the door. No matter how much she knocked on the door, he didn't move at all. How amazing! Lin Ji obviously hadn't heard of these rumors. She thought that with Mu Yaja's young and vigorous age, she could successfully climb onto the dragon bed if she dressed up a little more charmingly and sexily. But was that possible? Mu Yaja was a normal man. He also had vigor and desire. However, this kind of desire could only be shown in front of one person. As for the rest, he simply ignored them to the end. Thus, when Lin Ji was full of anticipation, she saw his handsome brows slightly raised and he said coldly, "What's the matter?" His handsome and cold face didn't have the slightest ripple. It was cold and indifferent, as if covered in ice and snow. Lin Ji was stunned. It was a completely different way of opening from what she had imagined. In her imagination, when she appeared dressed like this, shouldn't this man see through her motive at a glance and then pull her into the room? Was there something wrong with her? Lin Ji couldn't help but carefully reevaluate herself. There was nothing wrong with her. She even purposely pinched Yun Shirshir's demeanor. Yun Shirshir was just like her name. Her name was poetic and picturesque. She was also beautiful. If she had to be described, she was like the clouds in the mountain stream and the running water in the small spring. She had a unique style of the Jiangnan water village. Thus, Lin Ji deliberately followed Yun Shirshir's template and put on the same makeup as Yun Shirshir. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she actually looked similar to Yun Shirshir. Mu Yaja must have taken a liking to Yun Shirshir because he liked her temperament. Delicate and pretty, pure and beautiful. It was like a piece of flawless jade. Since that was the case, she would follow Yun Shirshir's example and imitate her. However, from Mu Yaja's indifferent eyes, her meticulous plans seemed to have some flaws. Not being able to attract this man at first glance made her feel a little frustrated. However, Lin Ji wasn't discouraged. When it came to sending herself to the door, Lin Ji knew that she had to be thick-skinned. She couldn't care less about face and dignity. Even if she had to beg him on her knees, she had to beg him to take her. Thus, Lin Ji raised the hand that was originally behind her back. In the palm of her hand was a bowl. Chapter 15:16. Lin Ji held the bowl, her eyes curved into crescents as she asked timidly, "Mr. Mu, may I sit in your room for a while?" The moment she said that, coupled with the bowl, her intention was clear. Whether it was in the open or in the dark, it was a hint to Mu Yaja. A bowl, homophony, one night. This was a clear indication that she wanted to sleep with him for a night. Sometimes, the unspoken rules hidden in the unspoken language were just that wonderful. The entertainment industry loved literature and art. So much so that even the act of sleeping with someone could be done in such a stylish manner and be bestowed with such elegant sentiments. Mu Yaja frowned slightly. Before he could say anything, Lin Ji was afraid that he would reject her, so she immediately expressed her attitude. "Mr. Mu, don't worry. I'm very obedient, very obedient. I'm a very obedient woman. I won't do anything that makes you unhappy, and I won't play any tricks. I'll definitely follow your orders like an imperial edict. But please don't reject me, okay?" After a pause, Lin Ji moved greedily and cautiously a few steps closer to the door. Tonight, she had to enter this room. Even if she couldn't climb into his bed, it didn't matter. Entering this room would at least mean that she had succeeded. Not far from here, she had specially ordered someone to secretly take a video. Once she entered this room, they would make a screenshot. When the time came, even if she didn't succeed in hooking up with a big shot like Mu Yaja, she could still use these videos to create hype. Lin Ji had put a lot of thought into this and was very scheming. Mu Yaja asked coldly, "Who asked you to come?" Lin Ji was stunned. "There's no one? I wanted to accompany you of my own accord." "No need," Mu Yaja said decisively and was about to close the door. However, how could Lin Ji give up just like that? Seeing that Mu Yaja was about to close the door and shut her out, she made up her mind. She clenched her teeth and unexpectedly stretched out her leg, trying to use her own flesh and blood to block the door from closing. Mu Yaja didn't notice at all, and he didn't expect her to do that. The door closed and her leg was pinched. With a stifled cry, Lin Ji's legs went limp and she half knelt by the door. Mu Yaja turned around and realized what had happened. This woman actually used her leg to block the door from closing. So vicious and merciless? Most people were ruthless only because of their attitude towards others. This woman was so cruel to herself. While Mu Yaja was in a daze, Lin Ji took advantage of the moment he was distracted and limped in through the crack in the door. Even if he had to crawl into this room. Lin Ji crawled into the room and closed the door behind her. Mu Yaja was completely stunned by her unscrupulous methods. After a long while, he finally returned to his senses and let out a cold laugh. "Woman, you have some tricks up your sleeve." In order to enter his room, she had even resorted to the ruse of injuring herself to gain his confidence. Using his own flesh and blood as the price? However, he had already seen many such shameless women and had long been used to it. Would these tricks work? He didn't like her at all. "Get out." Mu Yaja didn't give her any leeway and said coldly, "No." Chapter 15-17. "Just let me stay here tonight, okay? Let me serve you well. Don't worry, I'll definitely serve you well and satisfy you." As she spoke, Lin Ji actually took the initiative to kneel in front of him and reach out, wanting to touch him. Mu Yaja glanced at her from the corner of his eye and nimbly retreated, intending to avoid her at all costs. Lin Ji was instantly annoyed. How could she forget that Mu Yaja should like reserved and shy girls like Yun Shirshir? She actually forgot for a moment and revealed her true nature, impatiently wanting to pounce on him. He didn't like her like this. Thus, Lin Ji smiled and asked, "What do you like? Can I learn?" Mu Yaja was expressionless. Lin Ji continued, "If you like someone like Yun Shirshir, I can also become like her." "What's your motive? You can just say it. Don't beat around the bush." Mu Yaja impatiently interrupted her. Lin Ji's eyes widened, but she heard his cold and clear voice like snow. "What's your motive? Just say it and get lost after you're done." He could very well pick her up and kick her out of the door. But for some reason, seeing her face made him feel disgusted, and he didn't even want to touch her with a finger. He could clearly see that Lin Ji's timid and shy demeanor, like Lin Daiyu's, was deliberately imitating someone else. However, some people's temperaments were very unique. When it came to themselves, it was natural, and people couldn't help but want to protect and dote on them. However, if this temperament were to be imitated by others, it would only seem suspicious and pretentious, and especially disgusting. Yun Shirshir had a spiritual aura about her, but this spiritual aura couldn't be imitated. The hardest thing to imitate in a person was temperament. Lin Ji couldn't help but feel extremely embarrassed. She had never fallen into such a predicament before. In the past, when she delivered herself to the door, those rich men who saw her were clearly like hungry wolves who saw their prey. They couldn't wait to ferociously pin her down on the bed and devour her until she was skinned alive. But when it came to him, why did he get snubbed? Not to mention that she had been given the cold shoulder, she had shamelessly entered the room, but he had chased her away. She was really unwilling to accept this. Lin Ji felt extremely wronged. She blinked her eyes, and bean-sized tears rolled down her cheeks, dripping onto the expensive carpet under her feet. "But why can't I?" Lin Ji suddenly raised her voice and stared at him with tears in her eyes. She looked extremely pitiful. How am I inferior to her? Lin Ji raised her voice. I can serve you well. At the same time, I will be very obedient. If you say one, I won't say two. Before he could finish, Yun Shishir's shocked voice suddenly came from the bathroom. Mu Yaja? Mu Yaja suddenly turned his head, only to hear Yun Shishir's suspicious voice. Who's in the living room? Yun Shishir was originally lying in the bathtub, leisurely taking a bath. She was exhausted from being tormented by him. Looking at her body, she was bitten by a vile man with bruises intertwined, as if she had been bitten by poisonous insects. The shower in the bathroom was still running, so at first, she couldn't hear the movement outside the door at all. Until Lin Ji's grievances and cries alarmed her. Only then did she realize that there was someone else outside the door. Chapter 15:18. However, her brain was slow to react and she couldn't remember who it was. However, she could tell that it was a woman. Yun Shishir was shocked and curious about what was going on outside the door. She could hear a hint of conflict in the woman's voice. Hence, she stood up and casually wiped her body. Then, she put on a bathrobe and walked out of the room. Mu Yaja? Yun Shishir called out softly again, but it sounded very natural. Lin Ji finally heard that the voice wasn't a hallucination. There was a woman in this room. This woman is so capable. She could call Muyaja by his full name. He was a big shot with high authority and was from a prestigious family. She didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Yet, this woman could call him by his full name. She didn't have the time to figure out who this woman was. She could only curse silently. No wonder this man didn't want her to come in. It was no wonder that when she opened the door, she saw that he was wet. Her arrival had probably disturbed his good time. Alas, by the time she realized who the voice had come from, Yun Shishir's figure appeared in her line of sight. Yun Shishir walked into the living room and looked over. She saw Lin Ji half kneeling in front of Mu Yaja in an extremely awkward and embarrassed posture. In an instant, Yun Shishir's expression changed. She frowned and looked at Mu Yaja in confusion. Then, her gaze landed on Lin Ji's face. Her eyes were full of contempt. Why are you here? Why are you here? Almost at the same time, they spoke in unison. Lin Ji was shocked. In the next moment, her gaze locked onto Lin Ji. Yun Shishir was wearing a bathrobe. Because the belt of the bathrobe was tied very tightly, it wrapped around her entire body tightly. However, it was a bathrobe after all. The view on her neck couldn't be hidden no matter what. Therefore, Lin Ji could see the jade-like collarbones and fair skin on her neck at a glance. What was even more eye-catching were the incomparably ambiguous kiss marks. It was easy to imagine what had happened to her body just now. She was no longer the innocent girl who had just left school. He immediately understood what had happened in the living room just now. Because even now, she could still smell the lingering charm in the living room. It was so ambiguous that it made her blush. This was a mark that would only be left after an intense love affair. Yun Shishir followed her line of sight and looked at her own body. She caught a glimpse of the incomparably eye-catching mark and immediately pulled it into her clothes to cover it up. Lin Ji finally understood that she had come at a bad time. What happened? Yun Shishir looked at Mu Yaja suspiciously, as if waiting for an explanation. Why was Lin Ji here? Most importantly, she was wearing such revealing clothes. Although her clothes were neatly worn, the texture was really thin. Under the illumination of the light, her body could be seen at a glance. Yun Shishir came to a sudden realization as well. She finally understood what the other's motive was. She was planning to seduce someone with her beauty. Mu Yaja glanced at her coldly from the corner of his eyes. Get lost. Chapter 15:19. Left with no other choice, Lin Ji could only tidy herself up, wipe her tears, and return home dejectedly. Only then did this farce come to an end. Yun Shishir furrowed her brows in apparent displeasure. How could a woman send herself to his doorstep, kneeling and begging for his favor? Why did these women treat him like a tyrant from ancient times? Most importantly, this woman was Lin Ji, an incomparably disgusting woman. Yun Shishir felt as disgusted as if she had swallowed a fly. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in her throat, and she instantly felt uncomfortable all over. Even though Mu Yaja didn't do anything substantial, Lin Ji's behavior had unintentionally made her uncomfortable. She was thoroughly disgusted by what she had seen. Yun Shirshir clutched her chest. She was clearly infuriated. She wasn't angry at Mu Yaja, but she was deeply disgusted by Lin Ji's shamelessness. This was the first time she had seen it. Then, what about when she wasn't around? Did such things keep happening? Once she thought of the danger lurking around him, and the fact that so many women saw him as a god, chasing after him, and falling in love with him, her possessiveness was incomparably shameful. She felt dirty. There was an expensive carpet at the entrance. When Lin Ji knelt, she instantly felt that it was an eyesore. Thinking of how Lin Ji looked just now, kneeling there in disgust, she couldn't stand it anymore. She walked over and threw the carpet out of the door in disgust like a child. Mu Yaja looked at her childish behavior, but he couldn't help but chuckle softly. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. However, he noticed that her body was extremely stiff. He knew that she was disgusted and even a little jealous. However, he still found it funny and asked knowingly, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Yun Shirshir gave a cold reply, as if she was a little peeved. Mu Yaja smiled faintly. He was a little glad that after Lin Ji's torment tonight, he finally saw that this woman could be quite cute when she was jealous. This was the first time he saw her so jealous. She was fuming with anger, her hands holding her lapels, and a hostile aura that kept people away. Especially on that delicate and cute face, her delicate lips were slightly pouted, and he couldn't help but want to kiss her. And he too had done the same. He grabbed her chin, leaned in, and kissed her lips. Yun Shirshir pushed him away a little angrily, and questioned him a little unhappily, "Does this happen often?" Compared to her inexplicable anxiety, he seemed to be very patient, and responded unhurriedly, with a nonchalant attitude. Yun Shirshir was even more displeased. "Do women like her often come knocking on your door in the past?" The she was referring to was naturally Lin Ji. She wondered if there were many women like Lin Ji who had ulterior motives, coveting him. Were those women still sending themselves to his door dauntlessly, like a stream of carrots crossing the river, and begging for his favor? They were clearly in a civilized society of the 21st century, but these things that only happened in ancient times were really happening to her now. How laughable! There were actually women who trampled on him like this. He was happy to see her doubtful attitude. Chapter 15:20. Did this stupid woman finally have a sense of crisis? Did she finally understand that her man was also in high demand and that many women were eyeing him covetously? Finally, she was worried about this too. Mu Yaja was especially satisfied. However, he pretended to be natural and said, "A lot." His provocation was not intentional. Hence, Yun Shirshir did not detect anything unusual from his tone. She frowned and looked shocked. "A lot?" The man's lips curled into a smile as he retorted, "Isn't it normal?" Yun Shirshir was suddenly speechless. Yes, wasn't this a very normal thing? There were many such scenes in the entertainment industry. Lin Ji was one of them. Yan Bingqing, Han Yuyen, and the other A-listers had all done the same. Even Yang Mi, who got along with her peacefully, relied on the unspoken rules to get to her position. This was an indisputable fact. The entertainment industry was a luxurious circle. Beauties, money, power, and all kinds of darkness could find shelter here. Yun Shirshir's body stiffened when she thought of this. Mu Yaja said lazily, "There are many women in the entertainment industry. In order to get to the top, they send themselves to the rich man's room. What you don't know is that whenever I book a hotel, my hotel room number and all other information will be revealed in the next second. Then, many women will appear at my door, dressed in all kinds of flirtatious and seductive clothes." Yun Shirshir asked relentlessly, "What about you? Do you open the door and let them in?" Mu Yaja was very calm about this. Yun Shirshir was clearly skeptical of his claim. Then what exactly was the situation just now? Mu Yaja said, "In the past, I didn't like to interact with women in the industry. I thought they were dirty and disgusting. Those bodies looked beautiful, but under those beautiful faces, there was greed and lust. I didn't like it. What about Linji? Yun Shirshir obviously did not want to let go of this point. Why did you let her in? Mu Yaja frowned. He was indeed wronged on this point. Was he the one who let this woman in? I closed the door. Then she used her leg to block it. Yun Shirshir was shocked again. There was such a thing. This was too much. How could she be so shameless? She was rejected and still shamelessly came to him. How thick-skinned. Yun Shirshir uttered these words with a frown. Mu Yaja teased, do you think everyone is as thin-skinned as you? Yun Shirshir, she stared at him helplessly. Baby good. My little fella is jealous. Mu Yaja patted her head and coaxed her gently, as if coaxing a child. Don't be angry, okay? You won't look good when you're angry. Yun Shirshir completely lost her temper. I'm not in the mood to quarrel with you. She turned her face away. Obviously, she was still sulking. It was true that she could not blame him for this matter. However, she was still very angry and had nowhere to vent her anger. She kept it in her heart and did not know how to release it. She could not blame him, but she did not want to bother with him either. However, Mu Yaja found it funny. This woman, once she started to feel awkward, she really couldn't be coaxed with just a few words. Chapter 1521. The feeling of being jealous was surprisingly good. It felt really good. At least, it felt like she was being cared for. Mu Yaja was in a good mood. Hence, he reached out and clasped her shoulders, turning her body around to face him. There was a satisfied playfulness in his eyes. Are you jealous? His voice was low and deep, with a hint of devilish magnetism. Just like the rich and mellow red wine, it was enough to intoxicate anyone who heard it. Even Yun Shirshir couldn't help but be stunned by his deep and magnetic voice for a few seconds. When she came back to her senses, she still kept her lips tightly shut and didn't make a sound. Mu Yaja's gaze fell on her face. It was a little charming, a little cute, and a little twisted, but it made him faintly feel more excited. He lowered his head and precisely captured her breath, gently sucking on those tender and moist lips. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but push him. Hey! Mu Yaja didn't have the time to care about her struggle. She exerted more strength in her hand and pushed him away a little. I'm still angry. In other words, she wasn't in the mood to do these things at the moment. But he frowned slightly, feeling slightly displeased by her rejection. He didn't like her rejection. However, he could tell that she was still conflicted. Yun Shirshir looked up and stared at him seriously. I don't want this to happen again. She didn't want to see any woman clinging on to him and not letting him go. She didn't even want to see such a ridiculous thing happening in a hotel. She didn't like it and didn't want to see it again. She would feel disgusted, and at the same time, she would feel repulsed for a long time. Repulsed because she was extremely insecure. She was afraid of losing him. This feeling of insecure was not good, and it was very unpleasant. Mu Yaja stared at her but didn't say anything for a moment. He kept quiet. In the silence, Yun Shirshir was originally waiting for his response. However, when she didn't get a response, she looked up uneasily and saw that he was also staring at her deeply without blinking, as if he was deep in thought. What happened? Yun Shirshir pursed her lips. Is my request too much? You should admit that you're jealous. Mu Yaja suddenly curled his lips and nodded. He leaned closer to her face and looked into her eyes. He touched her nose and said, You're jealous of me. Yun Shirshir was startled. She knew in her heart that she was indeed jealous. This was undeniable. However, she was reserved and shy. For a moment, she was too embarrassed to admit it. Thus, she said, I just don't like. She stuttered, as clumsy as a helpless child, not knowing how to express the bitterness in her heart. I don't like this feeling. Mu Yaja patiently waited for her to express herself. Yun Shirshir looked up and said, I don't know, the feeling of being coveted by others. This feeling is so annoying. You can't belong to others. She incoherently spat out every word. Every word was like squeezing toothpaste out of her mouth. Wuxia restrained his gaze and smiled. His handsome eyes were hidden in the shadow of his hair. Hence, at that moment, she didn't see that hidden playfulness in his eyes. Chapter 1522. In the end, Xianxia mustered up all her courage and clenched her fists tightly. Using all her might, she said, "You belong to me. You belong to me. You belong to me and me alone. Do you understand?" Xianxia looked up at him. The unspoken words in her heart seemed to be silently questioning him. Wuxia's heart skipped a beat. His gaze froze as he stared at her in a daze. He did not expect that he would be waiting for this sentence. Xianxia helplessly tugged at the cuffs of his bathrobe. This small action was more like a silent act of coquettishness. Her tone softened instantly. With a hint of helplessness, she asked, "You belong to me, right?" He had said it before. He belonged to her and her alone. He would promise her a world. He would promise her the whole world. Wuxia was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, he laughed involuntarily. Grabbing her chin, he narrowed his eyes slightly. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he lightly pecked her little mouth that wanted to say something. "Yes, you're right." His broad and warm palm cupped her face. Her face was so small that he did not dare to use any strength when he held her face. He was afraid that he would accidentally hurt her. He pressed his lips against hers, unwilling to leave. Opening his handsome eyes slightly, his pupils were filled with endless charm. They were so dark that they shone brightly. It was as if countless stars were hidden within them, embellished with sparkling starlight. He was so close to her that their eyelashes were intimately intertwined. His eyelashes were so long that even his eyes brushed past her eyelids, leaving behind traces of itchiness. He really loved this torturous little thing. Wuxia pressed the tip of her nose and hugged her waist even tighter. At the same time, he blocked her lips and said, "Listen." Xianxia looked up and gazed into the depths of his eyes. "I belong to you and you alone." He said each word with a pause. Every word was said with incomparable seriousness. "Do you like this answer?" Xianxia was taken aback. It was as if a certain part of her heart had been struck hard, causing her to go limp. Wuxia smiled, but before she could respond, he kissed her. However, this kiss was not as domineering and fierce as it had been at the beginning. Instead, it was soft and gentle as it rubbed against her lips. Hugging her waist, he continued the unending kiss. The seductive kiss went all the way from the entryway to the living room, where they lingered on the sofa. This kiss was no longer limited to the sofa. Pressing his lips against hers, Wuxia's kisses gradually deepened and deepened. At the same time he pried open her lips, his hands also moved. With a few moves, he smoothly untied the knot on her waist. Her knot was very tight, but to him, it took only a few seconds for her clothes to be pushed aside. Xianxia was kissed until she felt like she was about to suffocate. It was rare that he gave her space to breathe. In just a moment, he sealed her lips again and kissed her deeply. She raised her hands and hugged his neck. It was rare for her to take the initiative to pull his bathrobe down to his shoulders, revealing his well-defined shoulders. Wuxia could not help but tease her, "Little one, in such a hurry?" After he said that, Xianxia was extremely embarrassed. Her face suddenly turned red as she stopped her actions and wanted to withdraw her hands. Chapter 1523. Wuxia's overly flirtatious words really made people blush and their hearts race. In front of others, he always gave people the impression that he was pure and ascetic, and he wasn't that enthusiastic about such things between men and women. Therefore, in the wealthy families, many young ladies from prestigious families flocked to him like ducks. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because other aristocratic young masters like him often had messy relationships with men and women. However, there had never been any rumors about him having a messy relationship. This was already considered extreme among the wealthy families. But in reality, there wasn't a man who wasn't passionate about such things in bed, and there wasn't a man who really said that he was pure and ascetic. This matter also depended on the partner. In other words, even if Linji tried her best to strip off all her clothes and stood in front of him flirtatiously, he might not even bat an eyelid. However, even at this moment, the woman in his arms stood in front of him fully clothed, without doing anything. Just one look was enough to make him have the urge to take her ruthlessly. He was a man who was full of energy, and he could maintain it for a long time at a time. After the two of them finished their session on the sofa, Xianxia was so tired that she couldn't stop panting. Looking at the man, he frowned and didn't feel that he was satisfied. This place was too small. There were many actions that he couldn't perform at all. In such a small battlefield, there was no place for him to use his skills. Thus, he hugged her, carried the woman who was panting, and strode into the bedroom. He threw her on the bed. Her petite body bounced slightly on the huge king-sized bed. Then, his tall body covered her in a dark mass and took advantage of her. Almost coherently, he merged with her again and continued what he hadn't been able to enjoy just now. At this moment, he was worn down by her to the point that he didn't have any rationality at all. This little thing, damn it, was so beautiful. He was especially greedy for the warmth in her body, and he couldn't bear to come out again. Accompanied by her intermittent moans, it made his blood boil even more. No matter what, he didn't know how to be satisfied. He couldn't wait to give it to her like this. I can't. No, I can't. Xianxia gripped the bedsheet tightly and almost cried. She begged, Muyaja, I'm dying. Her absurd pleas for mercy almost caused a certain man who had been cultivating to break his cultivation when he heard her words. He held back his laughter, leaned over and seductively bit her ear, but said in an incomparably domineering manner, I won't let you die. Xianxia didn't even have the strength to glare at him. Ridiculous. It was too absurd. It was not until the wee hours of the morning when she begged him in every possible way that he was willing to give up. The absurdity that she had suppressed for so long was finally released. She couldn't bear to let it end just like that. Xianxia was tormented by him to the point that her bones were about to fall apart. She begged for mercy again and again, but it was useless. This man who seemed to have inexhaustible energy did not listen to her at all. Even when she was exhausted, he still used those shy postures to torment her and provoke her. It was too vile. This man was simply a monster. It was as if he had inexhaustible energy. Chapter 1524. Sure. His voice was so soft that it seeped into her bones. Muyaja leaned close to her ear. His eyes were slightly open, and his thin lips were close to her ear as he murmured. He lovingly stroked her hair. He especially liked the look on her face at this moment. She was languid, intoxicated, and extremely enchanting. He had never thought that he would be so infatuated with a woman. Infatuated, immersed, and unable to control his emotions. All along, he had been proud of his strong self-control. He wouldn't be infatuated with things that he shouldn't be infatuated with. He could pick them up and let them go easily. However, now, he had a concern in his heart. At the same time, he was a little annoyed, but at the same time, he was conflicted and satisfied. Men were sometimes contradictory. They longed for freedom, but they were also greedy for warmth. Xianxia snuggled in his arms. In the warm room, they wandered charmingly. She hugged him and fell asleep very quickly. She was too tired. She was exhausted. After the carefree and unrestrained feeling, exhaustion hit her like a wave. Muyaja carried her into the bathroom and helped her freshen up. Under the light, he saw the marks on her body that looked like she had been bitten by poisonous insects. The bruises intersected with each other, and there was no doubt that these were his masterpieces. Vaguely, there was an inexplicable sense of accomplishment. A man's pursuit should be this desire to conquer. When Xianxia woke up, it was already noon the next day. When she opened her eyes, she heard the sound of newspapers being flipped. In the quiet room, it was a little abrupt. Xianxia turned her head and saw Muyaja sitting in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the bedroom. He was actually leisurely flipping through the newspapers. She was about to sit up, but the moment she moved, she felt as if her body was falling apart. She couldn't help but frown and let out a long, "Oh." It didn't matter if she didn't move, but when she moved, there were a few strange cracking sounds coming from her waist. Xianxia was really worried that her bones were really falling apart. Her movements alerted the man who was reading a newspaper by the window. Mu Yaja turned his eyes and looked at her. Against the light, the afternoon sun in Milan poured down on his body and dyed his hair a warm color. "He's awake?" His voice was clear and seductive, and he sounded leisurely. Xianxia was a little embarrassed as she replied, "Ing." She hid under the blanket and shyly curled into a ball. The moment she lifted the blanket, she inadvertently glanced at her body. The marks all over her body made her so embarrassed that she no longer had the courage to get out of bed. Like a coward, she shrunk back into the blanket. Mu Yaja couldn't help but smile at her adorable reaction. He got up and walked to the bedside. He sat down and reached out to grab a corner of the blanket, wanting to lift it. "No!" Xianxia struggled for a moment and clutched the blanket tightly. She looked at her as if she wanted to say something. Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. "Which part of your body have I not seen before?" Although she said that, she still felt that it was so damn embarrassing. Her body was covered with those marks. It was so embarrassing. Xianxia wanted to cry to death. Mu Yaja tugged at the blanket, but she refused to let go. She accidentally pulled her waist and instantly scrunched up her little face in discomfort. It was so sore and painful. Mu Yaja saw that her expression was a little strange. He frowned a little worriedly and asked, "What's wrong?" Xianxia shook her head. "What's wrong?" Chapter 1525. Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Turn over and lie on your stomach on the bed." She let out an "eh," as she didn't understand why he said that. "Be good, lie on your stomach." He guided her gently and patiently. Alas, she was still on her guard against him as if he were a wolf. She glared at him as if she was afraid that he would pounce on her the next second, just like he did last night. Her vigilant gaze made him not know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are you so guarded?" "Since when?" Although Xianxia didn't admit it, the vigilance in her eyes couldn't be concealed. Mu Yaja said faintly, "You don't have to be so guarded against me. Firstly, I just want to give you a massage now. Secondly, I want you, so there's no use for you to guard against me." Since he had already said so, Xianxia didn't dare to go against him. Hence, she obediently turned over and lay on her stomach on the bed. Mu Yaja opened the drawer. There was a box of rose essential oil that the hotel had prepared. He applied some on his hands and started to massage her. His technique wasn't considered professional, but it was just right to relieve some of the soreness. His broad palms rubbed the acupuncture points on her waist gently. She had never seen such a patient side of him serving someone. The man who had always been noble and imposing actually knew how to give someone a massage? If it was someone else, they wouldn't even dare to believe it. But Xianxia had the fortune to taste the feeling of being served by this man. At the same time that she felt comfortable, she also felt a little smug. This man really knew how to be considerate sometimes. After about half an hour, the soreness finally subsided a little. Xianxia let out a long sigh of contentment as her eyebrows slowly relaxed. She rolled into the bed and hugged the soft blanket. She stretched her waist again before she let out a long sigh of contentment. "Comfortable?" Mu Yaja patted her smooth little but lightly. "Stupid woman, be careful not to catch a cold." The doorbell rang. Mu Yaja got up and opened the door. Two people from the fashion store and the underwear store came in with exquisite packaging. "Chairman Mu." "Hello, sorry to disturb you." Mu Yaja nodded and gestured for them to put the clothes on the sofa. It turned out that he had woken up a long time ago. After tidying himself up, he called someone to send his clothes over. Xianxia didn't have a change of clothes, and the only dress she had was torn by him. She didn't care about it at that time, so she didn't know about this bad news for a while. If she knew that Mu Yaja had casually tore the 8-figure dress he had given her into pieces and threw it into the trash can like garbage, she would definitely cry from anger. It was not that he did not cherish that dress, but at some point in time, a man pursued a desire to conquer. At the same time, he did not want her to wear this dress again. Too enchanting, too eye-catching. When she wore this dress, no matter how it covered it, it made her look exceptionally sexy and beautiful. She was his treasure. This kind of beauty was not allowed to be coveted by others. When he sent the clothes into the bedroom, Xianxia saw the exquisite packaging in his hands and was a little confused. This is new clothes. Wuxia put it on the bed. It's already ironed. Just wear it directly. Chapter 1526. At this moment, she couldn't help but be amazed by this man's magical powers. He had actually grasped her measurements so accurately. Be it her bust, waist, or hips, there was not a single mistake. It was perfect. The style of the clothes was also good. The fabric was tight and covered all the marks on her body. Otherwise, she really wouldn't know how to face others. Especially her neck, which was full of love bites, could be seen at a glance. Oh my God, what exactly did he do to her body? Xianxia felt angry and amused at the same time. Wuxia ordered someone to deliver breakfast or lunch. After Xianxia ate, she suggested that they go shopping. Since they were already there, they should buy some souvenirs before leaving. There's nothing to shop in Milan. Wuxia didn't have any good suggestions. Milan was a paradise for shopping maniacs, but there wasn't anything special about it. The flight had already been arranged. Xianxia decided to return home early. Hence, she made a call to Qinzhou to inform him. You're returning home today? As expected, Qinzhou was obviously very angry when he heard that she was returning home early. There are a few more special shows coming up. If you don't stay and perform well, why are you rushing back now? Why don't you go to heaven? Xianxia said aggrievedly, I saw that I was on the headlines. I'm already satisfied. Qinzhou was speechless. Xianxia said pitifully, Chairman Qin, let me go back home. I'm so tired. I want to have a good rest. There are still a few more scenes to shoot. I need to conserve my energy so that I can handle those high-intensity scenes. Qinzhou then said mercifully, forget it. You go back home first. If you don't want to appear in the airport show, then so be it. On the way to the airport, they passed by a fashion plaza in the center of the bustling city. On the huge electronic screen, there was a report about the fashion banquet last night. She and Wuxia were there. Xianxia looked at the image of her and Wuxia holding hands, and the corners of her lips curled up involuntarily. On Weibo, there were endless reports about Fashion Week. Many media websites had created special reports about Fashion Week. However, because it was Wuxia's first official appearance in front of the media, there was no doubt that she used Wuxia's presence to jump onto the headlines like a rocket. For a long time, the public had many speculations about the mysterious young CEO of Mu Group. Finally, at the Milan Fashion Gala, the mysterious Crown Prince finally unveiled his mysterious veil. His handsome appearance and elegant temperament immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Wuxia's appearance was undoubtedly breathtaking. So much so that the limelight suddenly overshadowed all the A-list big shots in the country who had rushed to the fashion show, firmly occupying the first place of the hot search. Soon, the netizens on Weibo gave him the title of National Prince Charming. Oh my God! The CEO of Mu Group is so handsome. His handsomeness is on a whole new level. Oh my God, I'm going to abandon my Xianxia and follow this. He can obviously make a living with his face, but he has to rely on his talent. I heard that this young and mysterious CEO is worth hundreds of millions. Chapter 1527. The Mu Group plays an important role in the country's economy. It's like the heart of the country. He's rich, handsome, rich and good-looking. He's practically God's favorite. Oh my God, he's so handsome. The CEO of the Mu Group is so handsome. I've decided that I want to bear his children. Pfft. Yu was sitting in front of the computer when she read the netizen's comment. She almost spat out a mouthful of milk on the computer screen. She tried her best to hold it in but choked on the milk and coughed violently. She was dreaming. How dare she covet her daddy? She even said that she wanted to bear daddy's children? Was that even possible? Yu logged into her account. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she typed a few lines of words. Arthur, do you think you can sleep with him? Auntie, let me kindly remind you that it's daytime now. Go to the supermarket and buy a pillow. It'll be faster for you to dream. A few seconds after he replied, the netizen retorted angrily, Who are you? I want to sleep with my idol. What does that have to do with you? You're such a busybody. Yu frowned and sneered. She replied, Wuxia is my daddy. Of course, I have the right to say that. Andy, just give up. My daddy is already taken. After she finished typing, Yu leaned against the back of her chair elegantly. She looked relaxed and relaxed. Less than 10 seconds later, the netizen replied, I think you're the one who's dreaming, right? You even said that he's your daddy. Or you. Where did this primary school student come from? You're crazy. Wuxia is your daddy. Who would believe that? Yu raised her eyebrows but did not reply. She turned off her computer and walked to the French windows. She was in a good mood. Seeing mommy and daddy appear in front of the public together, seeing them holding hands, this feeling was really good. It turned out that happiness was not a difficult thing after all. After Xianxia returned to China, she hurried home. When Yu found out that his mother had returned to the country, he personally cooked a sumptuous feast. His culinary skills were getting better by the day. Compared to his past culinary skills, his culinary skills were obviously on another level. Xianxia only tasted one bite of the pork belly he made, and she felt so happy that she could fly to the sky. Oh my God! It was too delicious. No matter how delicious the food was, it couldn't compare to her son's cooking. While Xianxia was crazily cramming, she felt that she was simply too blessed. Not only did she have an obedient and adorable son, but this son also had superb culinary skills. Her stomach was completely captivated. She was viciously jealous of her future daughter-in-law as she tasted the chicken soup that Yu had personally brewed. Tears were about to fall from her eyes. Yu sat at the side and exchanged glances with Wuxia and Wuxia. A row of black lines appeared on their foreheads. Mommy? Xianxia looked up at him. What's wrong? My precious son? Yu looked at her with disdain and was a little speechless. Did you really come back from Milan Fashion Week? Of course. Before Xianxia could finish her sentence, Yu frowned and said disdainfully, but looking at the way you eat, you look like you escaped from a refugee camp in Africa. Xianxia was quite upset. She instantly felt as if thousands of arrows had pierced her heart. She complained in an aggrieved manner, You have such a sharp tongue. The truth always hurts. Chapter 1528. Wuxia couldn't hold it in any longer and spat out a mouthful of chicken soup onto the table. Wuxia's lips twitched violently. He glanced at the petrified and hurt woman and said, Good son, I thought you would be used to it by now. Yu snorted and said, I am used to it. But the way you eat is too ugly. Wuxia gritted his teeth and held back his laughter. He carefully looked back and forth between Yu and Xianxia. Xianxia tried to explain herself. I'm hungry. Also, Yu's cooking is so delicious that mommy can't control my hunger. You don't care about your image when you're hungry? Yu raised his eyebrows and said disapprovingly, Mommy, how many times have I told you? You have to be ladylike and elegant. Xianxia explained, Mommy has always been very elegant and has maintained a ladylike image. After she said that, she didn't forget to blissfully wink at him. Yu clutched his chest and said, Then Mommy should be considerate of Yu's feelings. The way you eat is too scary. Xianxia almost exploded from Yu's sharp tongue. This child was getting more and more sharp-tongued. How scary was the way she ate. Xianxia felt hurt and said sadly, Yu, please don't be so mean. Mommy will pay attention to her table manners. That's more like it. Good mommy. After he said that, he added, Eat slowly. Otherwise, it won't be easy to digest. The soup is still warm. If you drink it too quickly, it will burn your throat. Yu's chicken soup was very good. There was a layer of oil on the surface, so Xianxia accidentally scalded the tip of her tongue. Yu stood up and used a spoon to scoop away the hot oil. He then scooped a new bowl of chicken soup for Xianxia and placed it in front of her. Then, he rested his chin on his hands and looked at her with a doting smile. Mommy, try it. Xianxia carefully blew on it and took a sip. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. It's delicious. Yu then scooped a bowl for Wuxia and Wuxia. Muyaja also took a sip and raised a brow. Although he did not express anything, the incredulity in his eyes showed that he was amazed by the taste of this bowl of soup. Yu didn't ask him how it tasted. He was very confident in his cooking skills. He spent a lot of effort on this bowl of chicken soup and tasted it personally. He didn't add any flavorings, but it was still very delicious. Judging from Daddy's expression, he was also amazed by this bowl of chicken soup. Little Ichen, on the other hand, was drinking without a word. Although his face was expressionless, he was still smacking his lips in satisfaction after gulping down the entire bowl of soup. It was obvious that he was not satisfied yet. Yu, when you get married in the future, will you still be willing to make chicken soup for mommy? Xianxia suddenly asked pitifully. When she thought about how happy Yu's future wife would be, Xianxia finally understood why there were so many grudges between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. When she thought about it, she actually felt a little sad. Yu replied matter-of-factly, "Of course. Yu will take care of mommy's chicken soup for the rest of my life." Xianxia was very touched. At the same time, she was also touched by Yu's cute and witty reply. "So cute. Let mommy kiss you." Chapter 1529. After returning to China, Xianxia rested peacefully for a few days. She made up for all the sleep she had missed while rushing to work. However, this peace only lasted for a few days. As soon as Qinzhou rushed back to China, a lot of work came crashing down on him. After returning from Milan, each artist team began to show their prowess and churned out press releases in full swing. Especially Lin Ji's team, they exaggerated the grand occasion of Lin Ji's red carpet appearance to the heavens. It was as if a fairy had descended to the earth and stunned everyone. However, no matter how much they exaggerated, the photos were just placed there. It didn't give people the impression that she was stunning. The main reason was that after Qinzhou's team displayed Xianxia's live photos, it gave people the impression that Lin Ji's style was overshadowed. Without comparison, there would be no harm. This sentence was the absolute truth when it came to this matter. This infuriated Lin Ji's team, especially Lin Ji. Her face turned ashen when she saw the stark contrast between how the netizens were belittling her and Xianxia. She couldn't stand the sharp eyes of the public. Lin Ji had always boasted of being the #1 beauty in ancient costumes, but she couldn't stand being compared to Xianxia. Her temperament was clearly defeated. This Qinzhou is really something. As soon as he returned to China, he couldn't wait to start a bloodbath. He wanted to praise Xianxia to the heavens. However, wasn't it just bragging? It only took a short while for Qinzhou's team to be smug. After the popularity of Fashion Week, who would pay attention to Xianxia? This time, however, Lin Ji was once again taken aback. Within a few days, Louis Vuitton's official Weibo posted a group photo that shocked the entire entertainment industry. It was a group photo of Louis Vuitton's CEO in Greater China, Han Donghua, Louis Vuitton's brand director, Andy, and Xianxia. The three of them sat together, smiling at the camera. When the official Weibo posted this group photo, it only included a handshake and a heart-shaped emoji. No other information was revealed. However, this photo set off an uproar in the fashion industry. Han Donghua, the CEO of Louis Vuitton's Greater China region, and the CEO of the Greater China region. It could be said that his status was incomparably noble. He had never taken a photo with any female celebrities in the country, and was a relatively low-key person. As for Louis Vuitton's brand director, Andy, he was one of Louis Vuitton's top executives who held great power behind the scenes. They rarely exposed their tracks to the public. Louis Vuitton's official Weibo published this group photo, which made people's imagination run wild. At that time, Louis Vuitton's official Weibo also published a photo of Gu Xingzi and the two men. After that, Gu Xingzi signed a contract with Louis Vuitton and became the brand ambassador of Louis Vuitton in Greater China. The outside world couldn't help but speculate. Could it be that Xianxia got Louis Vuitton's resources and became the new brand ambassador of Louis Vuitton in Greater China? If that was really the case, then this was a top-notch resource. At least, in the country, no female celebrity could get such a resource. Not long after, Yun Shishir Studios Weibo posted a group photo of Yun Shishir and Han Donghua enjoying dinner together. The two of them sat together, smiling, and had a tacit understanding. Chapter 1530. Half a month later, this guess was finally verified. Yun Shishir's personal Weibo published a series of large posts and announced that she would be LV's brand ambassador. Once the news came out, it caused a huge commotion. Especially Lin Ji, she was so angry that her teeth were about to break. In fact, during this trip to Milan, Qin Zhou had met up with Han Donghua to discuss this matter. He and Han Donghua were old friends and had a good relationship. Coincidentally, Louis Vuitton was looking for an ambassador to expand the Chinese market. Hence, during this Milan Fashion Week, Qin Zhou strongly recommended Yun Shishir to Han Donghua. At first, Han Donghua was a little hesitant. After all, Yun Shishir had just debuted not long ago. Whether it was fame or popularity, it was still very limited. However, on the red carpet, Yun Shishir's noble and elegant Oriental classical aura conquered him instantly. Han Donghua was an American-born Chinese. Although he grew up overseas, he was very obsessed with Oriental classical culture. Yun Shishir's mysterious and elegant classical aura attracted him instantly. Han Donghua mentioned this matter to Sir Andy and also mentioned Yun Shishir to Sir Andy, expressing his admiration for Yun Shishir. Sir Andy also approved of Yun Shishir. However, before this, Han Yuyen's team had already contacted him and expressed their intention to work together. Louis Vuitton's headquarters also leaned towards Han Yuyen's idea of a new ambassador. After all, compared to Han Yuyen, who had debuted many years ago, Yun Shishir had just debuted and was lacking in many aspects. However, on the night of the fashion banquet, when Yun Shishir appeared with Mu Yaja in a cheongsam gown, Sir Andy immediately changed his mind and decided on Yun Shishir as LV's ambassador for China. This was because beside Yun Shishir stood Mu Yaja. Just the name Mu alone was enough to convince her. This was capital. Putting aside capital, she was more outstanding than Han Yuyen. While being outstanding, they also had a lot of resources. Thus, Han Yuyen was mercilessly squeezed out. When Han Yuyen heard the news, she was so angry that she flew back to China on the same day. She was depressed for a few days and still hadn't recovered from the shock. It was too cruel. Her team had worked hard for a long time to get this resource. In the end, she actually lost to a newbie like Yun Shishir? What a disgrace. However, this was nothing. Han Yuyen heard that Yun Shishir had signed an 8-figure contract with Louis Vuitton. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. 8 digits. An endorsement worth tens of millions. On what basis? For a big brand like Louis Vuitton, even if she was a diva, her contract would only be 8 figures. Yun Shishir, a newcomer who just debuted, actually signed a contract worth 8 figures? When Gu Xingzi signed a contract with Louis Vuitton, it was only 7 figures. When Han Yuyen's team first approached Louis Vuitton, they even stated that if they could sign an endorsement deal with Louis Vuitton, they wouldn't mind paying the signing fee. Yun Shishir actually signed an 8-figure contract? Han Yuyen felt extremely unbalanced. Lin Ji also felt the same way. When she found out that Yun Shishir had signed a contract with a sky-high price, she was so angry that she cried on the spot. She couldn't help but curse viciously in her heart. How did Yun Shishir get this contract? Unspoken rules? Chapter 1531. At the thought of this, she had nowhere to vent the bitterness in her heart. This news alarmed Song Enya as well. Some time ago, she went overseas to relax. When she returned, she learned of this news. She had always been more concerned about the fashion industry. As a socialite, she was very particular about big brands. She was also keen on international brands like Louis Vuitton and Chanel. When she browsed Weibo and learned of this news, she was also a little shocked. Yun Shishir actually signed with Louis Vuitton? Brother Mu must have helped her get the resources, right? Otherwise, how could a newcomer who had just debuted get such a top fashion resource like Louis Vuitton? In the past few days after she returned, she discovered that there seemed to be a huge change in the Mu family. There was a huge upheaval in the Mu group. Mu Lianjue had passed away from an illness. The 4th son of the Mu family, a core figure with a high position in the family. Not only that, Song Enya also noticed that Mu Wanru seemed to have disappeared. The muse announced to the public that Mu Yaja and Mu Wanru had broken off their engagement. Song Enya did not know whether to be happy or worried about this news. She was happy that since Mu Yaja and Mu Wanru had broken off their engagement, did that mean that she had another chance? However, she was worried that even if brother Mu and Mu Wanru had broken off their engagement, so what? Yun Shirshir, this stumbling block, had not been dealt with yet. At the thought of Yun Shirshir, Song Enya felt that this woman was really detestable. Why was brother Mu still not tired of her? She thought that brother Mu would have long gotten tired of Yun Shirshir. However, when she returned to the country, she saw Yun Shirshir's face that made her want to strangle her to death. She was extremely disgusted. She still remembered the smug look on that B*TCH's face when she personally went to apologize to Yun Shirshir for brother Mu's sake. Song Enya felt as disgusted as if she had swallowed a fly alive. In her eyes, Yun Shirshir was a lowly commoner, while she was a high and mighty noble lady. She actually wanted her to lower her head and apologize to this lowly commoner. However, for the sake of elder brother Mu, she could endure this anger. For the sake of elder brother Mu, she gritted her teeth and endured this grievance. The problem was that this lowly commoner actually did not accept her apology and even accused her of being insincere. Song Enya was so angry that she wanted to tear her into pieces. As a high and mighty noble lady, as the daughter of a socialite and the mayor's daughter, it was already a great favor for her to bend down and apologize to her. Not only did she not Yun Shirshir, but she was also insulting her. However, this lowly commoner had brother Mu's support and love. She couldn't do anything to her for the time being. This was what infuriated her the most. This was simply unbearable. Song Enya could not do anything to her, so she went abroad to relax. When she returned, she found out that brother Mu and Mu Wanru had broken off their engagement. However, not long after this news was spread, Song Yunshi brought back a shocking piece of news. Enya, do you know? Mu Wanru has gone crazy. When Song Enya heard this shocking news from Song Yunshi, she was dumbfounded. For a moment, she could not digest this shocking news. What? Mu Wanru has gone crazy? Chapter 1532. Song Enya came back to her senses and pestered Song Yunshi. That can't be, right? Brother, you're lying. Why would I lie to you? Song Enya looked at him with her hands behind her back and still had some doubts. Maybe you're joking with me? Song Yunshi sat on the sofa, lit the cigarette, and took a deep puff. Seeing Song Enya pestering him with a suspicious expression, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Do I have nothing better to do? Why would I joke with you like this? Then how did you know? Song Enya still did not believe him, but she compromised and wanted to find out more about the situation from him. Do you want to know? At this moment, Song Yunshi deliberately kept her in suspense. He snorted and crossed his arms over his chest. I've been tired all day. If you want to know the answer, hurry up and massage my shoulders. Song Enya pouted, but she could not stop him. She stood up, walked behind him, and began to massage his shoulders. While Song Yunshi was feeling satisfied, he opened his mouth and recounted the entire incident. There was a provincial mental hospital in the capital. It was very large and had a lot of medical resources. Mentioning this matter was mainly due to a coincidence. Because of an unspeakable matter, Song Yunshi needed to go to this hospital to sign something. This thing was a mental illness report. Song Yunshi's friend had gotten into an accident. As for what happened, Song Yunshi did not tell Song Enya. One of his friends was sued in court. He was young and frivolous, so something happened to him. If he went to court, the situation would be very disadvantageous for him. However, if there was a mental illness report, this matter might be much easier to handle. Hence, he asked his father to find Song Yunshi and told him the purpose of his visit. He asked him to get such a thing for him. At first, Song Yunshi was unwilling. However, this friend of his was a more reasonable person. He gave him a special letter. Song Yunshi opened it and read it before agreeing to this matter. Therefore, he spent the entire day on this matter. When Song Yunshi arrived at the hospital, He wandered around the hospital out of boredom while waiting for the report to be issued. However, it was quite a coincidence. He had accidentally bumped into Mu Wanru. There was a very remote courtyard in the hospital. There were artificial mountains and flowing water. The environment and facilities were extremely beautiful. While he was wandering around, he saw a nurse twisting a female patient's neck and dragging her by the collar to the fountain. Without saying a word, the nurse pressed the female patient's head into the fountain. Song Yunxi was not surprised. In the mental hospital, such things were not unfamiliar. In fact, they were very common. There were many severely mentally ill patients in the mental hospital. When they acted up, they didn't recognize their relatives and went crazy. As a result, the doctors and nurses in the hospital were injured by them. Some of the nurses were good-tempered. They knew that it was because of their illness, so they didn't pursue the matter. However, some of the nurses were petty. If they were scratched or bitten by a patient, they would pull the patient to the side and punch and kick them until their faces were bruised and swollen. They would secretly torture them. Some of the patient's family members came from powerful backgrounds. The nurses would take very thin needles and stab them fiercely to vent their anger. Chapter 1533. Song Yunxi stopped and saw the nurse pressing the female patient's head into the spring pool. While pinching her body, she cursed, "Crazy! Stupid crazy woman! Who told you to scratch me? Who told you to bite me? Drown you! Drown you!" The female patient struggled crazily. Her movements were very big, and the water splashed everywhere. Song Yunxi frowned slightly. She walked forward and grabbed the nurse's arm. "What are you doing?" "Ah," the nurse was shocked. She turned around and saw an unfamiliar man in a suit and leather shoes. He was dressed respectfully. She immediately stopped her movements and looked at him in fear. The crime was caught red-handed. The nurse was a little helpless and explained incoherently that, "Sir, I'm sorry to let you see such a scene. I didn't want to, but this patient is so fierce. When she's ill, she scratches and bites like a lunatic. I had no choice but to teach her a lesson." As she spoke, she rolled up her sleeves and showed him, "Look, these are all scratches and bites from her. Sir, you'd better stay away from her, lest she hurt you." The nurse was still excitedly defending herself. The abused female patient at the side fell to the side of the spring pool and lay on the pool platform. Her wet hair covered her body in a sorry state. At this moment, she was relieved and was bending over, coughing violently. Song Yunxi frowned. When the female patient raised her head while coughing, she felt that her face was a little familiar. Sending permission quickly stepped forward and grabbed her by the collar, forcing her to raise her head. However, after her hair was scattered, a familiar face was revealed. Mu Wanru. How could it be her? Song Yunxi was completely dumbfounded. The reason why she did not recognize her at first glance was that Mu Wanru was haggard and in a sorry state. Her face was sallow and thin, and her cheeks were sunken in. All kinds of scars were exposed on her skin. Her eyes were empty and lifeless, like a puppet without a soul. She looked unfamiliar. How could it be her? Why was she here? Song Yunxi was surprised and in disbelief. She asked the nurse next to her, "What's the patient's name?" "Sir, do you know her? Answer me." Song Yunxi didn't have much patience. Her face was gloomy and serious. The nurse stammered. When she was admitted to the hospital, her name wasn't registered. However, when this patient was ill, she often said a name. "Whose name?" "What's her name?" "Xianxia. It's the same name as that popular celebrity recently, so I remember it very clearly." Upon hearing this, Song Yunxi's eyes darkened. He turned around and looked at her. With a suspicious gaze, he probed, "Mu Wanru?" As soon as he called out this name, she seemed to have some reaction to this name and turned her gaze towards him. "How do you know my name?" Mu Wanru was like a young and childish child. She laughed crazily a few times, pointed at him, and then pointed at herself. You know me?" Song Yunxi turned pale with fright. His suspicions were confirmed. This person was Mu Wanru. But why was she here? This was a mental hospital. A place where mental patients were locked up. Chapter 1534. Why are you here? As soon as Song Yunxi finished speaking, Mu Wanru suddenly saw a nurse walking toward her from the side. She immediately panicked and hid behind Song Yunxi. She pointed at the nurse and wailed, "Devil! You devil! You're the devil who killed my child. Don't come over. Get lost. Get lost." She screamed crazily and hid behind Song Yunxi. Her eyes were wide open as if she had seen a ghost. Song Yunxi's face was filled with embarrassment. The nurse had a helpless expression on her face. She called the security department and said that the patient had sneaked out. Even when the security department escorted Mu Wanru back to the ward, Song Yunxi was still in a daze. Later, she found out from the hospital director that the patient had gone crazy due to excessive stimulation. She also suffered from a very strong paranoia and her mental state was extremely unstable. She was sent here by a mysterious person. When she was sent here, the person did not give any information about the patient and only asked the hospital to take her in. At the same time, as a condition, this person built a medical building for the hospital. Only then did the hospital director happily accept the patient. Song Yunxi knew that the hospital director was deliberately hiding it from her. She guessed that Mu Wanru must have been sent by the muse and asked the hospital to hide her identity. Mu Wanru had gone crazy. Out of humanitarian reasons, the muse sent her to a mental hospital and gave her a decent place to stay. However, Mu Wanru's identity was special. The muse repeatedly asked the hospital to strictly protect all information and forbade it from being revealed to anyone. After Song Yunxi received the test report, she did not stay in the hospital for long. Song Enya still felt that the whole thing was quite mysterious. How could a perfectly fine person go crazy for no reason? After Song Yunxi finished speaking, she could not help but sigh. "Enya, you didn't see that scene. When I saw Mu Wanru in the past, she was noble and magnanimous. She had the temperament of a lady from a wealthy family. When I saw her today, she no longer looked dignified. Her hair was disheveled and she was crazy, just like a beggar. I don't know what happened, but she really went crazy. I guess there's no hope. She can only spend the rest of her life in the hospital." Song Enya was still in a daze. "I still can't believe it. How did Mu Wanru go crazy? Which hospital is she in?" "Dern Hospital," Song Yunxi replied. Song Enya seemed to be deep in thought. "What? You don't believe my words and you want to see it for yourself?" Yunxi, pretending to be unhappy. Song Enya hurriedly replied, "No. Brother, listen to yourself. I just a little. I can't believe it. I can't believe it." She. What? Song. It's impossible for a person to go crazy for no reason. She must have been agitated. That's enough. You're so stupid. Don't think too much about those useless things. Song Enya said angrily, "What? Brother, you only know how to make fun of me." Chapter 1535. After sitting in the living room for a while, Song Yunxi went to the study to do some reading. Song Enya, on the other hand, sat on the sofa in a daze for a long time. Has Mu Wanru really gone mad? Daoist Hospital was the only provincial psychiatric hospital in the capital. There were many mentally ill patients there. Is Mu Wanru really in there? The next afternoon, Song Enya drove to Daoist Hospital. When she entered, the security guard stopped her. "Hello, miss. You are..." She panicked for a moment but maintained her composure. "I'm here to visit a patient's family." "Oh, come and register," the security guard instructed. She casually wrote down a name and number on the registration book and was allowed to enter. She walked to the inpatient department. As soon as she stepped through the door, she felt a chill in her bones. The lobby of the inpatient department was extremely spacious, but it gave off an extremely oppressive feeling. The wind that blew from all directions invaded his body, causing him to shudder in fear. She had heard that the psychiatric hospital was a very scary place. Even a mentally healthy person would be driven crazy by the oppressive atmosphere here. This was not a lie at all. It was really too oppressive here. It gave off the feeling of hell on earth. When she reached the third floor, she could even hear several hysterical voices from the end of the long corridor. Song Enya looked over suspiciously. The wards here had a double-layered security design, with a wooden door and a stainless steel railing blocking the outside. A mentally deranged patient was grabbing the stainless steel door and shaking it wildly while screaming. His shrill cries echoed in the corridor, making one feel inexplicably flustered. "How do you do, miss?" The sudden inquiry from behind startled her. She screamed uncontrollably and turned around abruptly, only to see a nurse standing awkwardly at the same spot, looking at her in confusion. "I'm sorry. Did I scare you?" When she saw that it was a nurse from the hospital, she was secretly annoyed at herself for making a fuss over nothing. She immediately calmed herself down and smiled. "I'm sorry. I was a little frightened." "It's all right." The nurse paused and asked carefully, "Miss, who are you looking for?" "It's like this. I'm looking for someone. She's in this hospital. I'm here to visit her." "Okay, may I ask who the patient is? What's your name?" Xianxia looked into her eyes and hesitated for a moment before slowly saying, "Her name is Mu Wanru." Mu Wanru? The nurse had a suspicious look on her face. Clearly, she had never heard of this name before. "Wait, I have her photo." Xianxia took out a photo of Mu Wanru from her bag and handed it to her. The nurse took it from her, but the moment her eyes fell on the photo, her expression changed. She immediately returned the photo to the missy and shook her head. "There's no such person here." However, her panicked expression clearly proved that she was lying at this moment. Xianxia, who had studied psychology to a certain extent, observed the nurse's expression and was certain that she had recognized the person in the photo at first glance. She was lying. Chapter 1536. Mu Wanru was clearly in this hospital. However, due to some unspoken regulations, or for the sake of confidentiality, the nurse said that there was no such person in the hospital. Xianxia smiled and said calmly, "I know she's here. I'm her friend. Can you bring me to see her?" "No way." The moment the nurse opened her mouth, she realized that she had misspoken and quickly corrected herself. "Miss, I've already said that there's no such person in this hospital. You mustn't make things difficult for me." "Why would I make things difficult for you when you put it that way?" Xianxia smiled gently. She then slowly reached into her handbag and walked toward the nurse. "I know she's here. I'm here today to visit an old friend. I don't have any other intentions, nor do I have any intention of making things difficult for you." As she spoke, she inched closer to the nurse and carefully took out something wrapped in a stack of letters from her handbag. She then stuffed it into the nurse's hands with a smile in her eyes, expressing her friendliness first. The moment the nurse's hand touched the thick bundle of letters, her heart skipped a beat. "The sky is so thick." She pinched the letter with her fingertips and roughly knew what number was in the letter. The nurse's face became a little hesitant. She looked at the woman with a friendly smile in front of her with some hesitation. "Miss, I won't hide it from you. The person in the photo you showed me earlier is indeed in this hospital. However, the director has made it clear that this patient's identity is very special, so no one is allowed to visit her. No matter who you meet, you have to announce to the public that there's no such person." The corners of Xianxia's lips curled up, but the smile in her eyes deepened. "I know the rules. As long as you bring me to see her, I'll pretend that nothing happened after that." After a pause, she added, "As long as you bring me to see this person, I'll give you more benefits. Trust me." The nurse hesitated for a long time, but the thick stack of letters in her hands was too tempting. She had a count in her hands. She touched the letter and found that it was definitely a 5-digit number. What a tempting number! She had worked in this hospital for 3 years, and her monthly salary, including performance, was at most 3,000 to 4,000 yuan. Such a huge sum of money was equivalent to a pie falling from the sky. She held it in her hands and was reluctant to let it go. Humans were all greedy for money. With money, it was naturally easy to pave the way. The nurse was finally tempted. She took the money and led the way without saying a word. Xianxia followed her all the way out of the inpatient department. After passing through 18 winding water bridges and corridors, they arrived at a small, secluded building. This small building was the old building of the hospital. 10 years ago, after the government allocated funds to trim the new building, this old inpatient building was completely abandoned. However, because the quality of the building was still acceptable, it was not torn down. After some renovation, it became a dormitory. Chapter 1537. She had a count in her hands. She touched the letter and found that it was definitely a 5-digit number. What a tempting number! She had worked in this hospital for 3 years, and her monthly salary, including performance, was at most 3,000 to 4,000 yuan. Such a huge sum of money was equivalent to a pie falling from the sky. She held it in her hands and was reluctant to let it go. Humans were all greedy for money. It was naturally easy to pave the way with money. The nurse was finally tempted. She took the money and led the way without saying a word. Xianxia followed her all the way out of the inpatient department. After passing through 18 winding water bridges and corridors, they arrived at a small, remote building. This small building was Den Hospital's old building. 10 years ago, after the government allocated funds to renovate a new building, this old inpatient department building was completely abandoned. However, because the building's quality was passable, it was not demolished. After some renovation, it became a dormitory. The nurse led her all the way to the 3rd floor and stopped at the door of a ward on the 3rd floor. She then reminded her, "The patient's condition is very unstable. She often goes crazy, so you can't go in. You can only stand at the door and take a few glances. Also, it's best to stay away from the door, lest you hurt yourself." Xianxia nodded. "Okay, I understand. Then, I'll open the door now. Please take a few steps back." Xianxia obediently took a few steps back and watched nervously. The nurse unlocked the iron door first, then pushed open another door inside. She then closed the iron door and locked it again. Xianxia could not help but walk forward. Through the heavy metal bars, she finally saw the back of the person in the ward. She hugged her knees and sat on the bed with her back facing the door. Her whole body was trembling slightly, and her hands were constantly pulling at her hair. A piece of hair that had been pulled out was on the snow-white bedsheet. However, she did not seem to know the pain as she continued to pull at her hair, as if she could not wait to pull out all the messy hair on her head. In his memory, Mu Wanru had long hair that made people envious. It was black and shiny, with a natural and beautiful luster. But now, her beautiful hair seemed to have been cut short by a lot. It was so messy that it looked like it had been a long time since she washed it. Her hair was dirty and messy. Because it was too greasy, her hair seemed to have clumped together. She seemed to feel that her scalp was extremely itchy. She scratched and pulled at it. Some places were scratched so hard that a bald patch was left. Xianxia furrowed her brows in disgust. As soon as the door was opened, a stench from inside hit her in the face. It was as if the person had not bathed for a long time. The combination of the sour stench and the stench of excrement was nauseating. When the patient's condition is unstable, he often loses control of his bowels and excrement. His clothes are stained with his excrement, so there's a stench in the room, the nurse explained. Xianxia was a clean freak, so when she smelled the stench, she could not help taking out her handkerchief to cover her nose and mouth. The nurse smiled a little awkwardly. "I didn't have time to clean it up today. She must be filthy now. Why don't you come again next time?" "No need." Chapter 1538. The nurse hesitated for a long time before nodding her head. Before she left, she did not forget to remind her, "Don't get too close to her. Be careful that she doesn't hurt you." With that, she left. Xianxia stood at the door and watched for a while before carefully probing, "Sis Wanru?" The back of the person on the bed stiffened as if she had heard her voice. She then turned to stone and did not respond. Xianxia furrowed her brows and was about to speak when the person on the bed suddenly turned her head around. A face as pale as a ghost's came into view, giving her a fright. She could not help taking a step back and patting her chest, still feeling a little scared. Mu Wanru suddenly got off the bed. Her pair of empty eyes stared at her blankly, lifeless and numb. "Who are you? Sis Wanru, don't you recognize me?" Xianxia tilted her head, clearly puzzled. Mu Wanru looked a little timid, as if the woman standing at the door was a terrifying scourge. She leaned against the wall and trembled in fear. "Don't come over. Don't hurt me. Go away, go away." Xianxia was taken aback. She remained expressionless for a long time before the corners of her lips curled up into an arrogant smirk. "Don't you recognize me? Ha! I'm Enya." As she spoke, she sized her up with disgust. A sinister look appeared in her eyes. "Ha! Muwanru, oh Muwanru, so you have a day like this too. I didn't expect you to end up in such a miserable state. How pitiful." She gloated and mocked her as she sized her up in disdain. "Look at you. Take a good look at you now. You're dirty and sloppy. How disgusting. How does it feel to be abandoned?" Song Enya paused for a moment before spitting out 2 words. "You deserve it." Because of these 2 words, Mu Wanru's expression changed. She looked like she understood, but also like she didn't. Her expression was a little strange. "Mu Wanru, I've wanted to say this to you for a long time." Song Enya stood at the door and looked down at Mu Wanru condescendingly. It was as if the latter was nothing more than a pitiful ant beneath her feet that she could easily trample to death. "Brother Mu is mine. It belongs to me." "Brother Mu," Mu Wanru repeated it a few times in her mind. Suddenly, the look in her eyes changed. A monstrous hatred appeared in her eyes. It was twisted and terrifying. She suddenly pounced at the door like a hungry wolf. Both her hands reached out the metal bars and grabbed at her angrily. Song Enya, who was standing very close to the door, was caught off guard and could not dodge in time. 2 bloody scratches were left on her face. She screamed and covered her face as she took a few steps back. She felt a burning pain on her face where she had scratched. When she touched it with her fingers, she felt a sharp pain. What are you doing?" Song Enya covered her face and yelled at her. Mu Wanru, on the other hand, seemed to have gone crazy. She kept making muffled sounds as her hands scratched in her direction. She was slurring her words and could not make out what she was saying at all. Song Enya hurriedly took out a hand mirror to check her face. There were 2 bloody scratches on her face from the other's sharp nails. Chapter 1539. Song Enya wiped her hands with a handkerchief and frowned in pain. She then looked at Mu Wanru's long fingernails, which were embedded with a mixture of black and yellow filth, and felt nauseous again. How disgusting! Oh God! Just how dirty were her hands! When she pounced on her, the gust of wind that came with her was accompanied by a fishy stench. Song Enya looked at the room behind her and saw that it was extremely dirty. There were feces, vomit, and all kinds of urine stains in the room. It was a sight that made one's scalp tingle. Mu Wanru screamed like a madwoman, "Yun Shirshir! I'm going to kill you! I'm going to kill you!" Song Enya was stunned. Suddenly, a strange and vicious expression appeared on her face. "You recognize me? Yun Shirshir, even if you turn into ashes, I'll still remember you. I won't let you off. You deserve to die. You deserve to die. You killed my child. You're the one who killed my child." "Child? What child?" Song Enya was stunned. Why did she keep saying that Yun Shirshir killed her child? Wasn't Mu Wanru infertile? Could it be? Was it her and Brother Mu's child? Song Enya's face turned ashen when she thought of this. Where did your child come from? Song Enya easily lost her rationality when it came to Mu Yaja. She became hysterical and questioned Mu Wanru sternly. "Say it. Is the child yours and Brother Mu's? Say it. Say it." Mu Wanru did not seem to hear her, though. She pounced on the metal door with a strange and sinister expression on her face. "It's all your fault. It's all your fault. You're the one who killed my child. It's all your fault. Return my child to me. Return my child to me." Song Enya panicked. She rushed forward and slapped Mu Wanru, leaving a deep handprint on her cheek. You haven't answered my question. Say it. Where did your child come from? "Ha! My child is gone. It's gone. My child was killed by you." Mu Wanru, however, did not answer her question. She looked extremely depressed as she slid to the ground, her eyes empty and lifeless. "The child is gone. The child is gone. Yun Shirshir, you deserve to die. You deserve to die." Song was filled with anger. She had lost her rationality, but when she regained her senses, she sneered at herself. She had actually stooped to the level of a lunatic. Where did the child come from? She must have been delusional. She had been delusional, she had been delusively. Song Enya looked at Mu Wanru. While she was angry, she was also secretly pleased. At least, Mu Wanru was crazy. This was the consequence of going against her. Who told you to fight with me? Song Enya suddenly cursed. Who told you to fight with me for Brother Mu? Mu Wanru, this is your retribution. You can't win against me. You and Xianxia are the same. Brother Mu is mine. None of you have the right to fight with me. With that, she snorted and turned to leave. After leaving the ward, the nurse hurriedly chased after her. Just as she was about to speak, she was surprised to see the 2 red marks on her face. Chapter 1540. She's really crazy. She doesn't even recognize me anymore. She just pounced on me and scratched my face. Song Enya's face was sullen and her eyes were fierce. When she turned to look at the nurse, she forced a smile. It's fine though. After all, she's already crazy. I can't stoop to her level. The nurse exchanged a few pleasantries before begging her again. Please don't tell anyone about what happened today. Otherwise, I'll definitely be fired by the hospital. I beg of you. All right. I got it. Song Enya suddenly asked, Oh, right. What's your name? Li Qian. Song Enya turned around and left. Before she left, she went to the hospital director's office and told him about what had happened today. She mentioned one thing. There's a nurse in your hospital. I asked her to take me to visit a patient. She actually shamelessly asked me for a red packet. How exactly does your hospital train its employees? Even a lowly nurse knows how to be corrupt and accept bribes? The director's face turned white after hearing her words. He immediately made a phone call and confirmed that there was indeed such a thing. Then he fired the caregiver named Li Qian on the spot. Song Enya smiled smugly and left the hospital. If she was bullied, no one would have an easy time. After resting for a few days, Xianxia was notified to join the production team and attend the press conference held by the production team of Lethal Beauty. It was not until all the main creators were present at the press conference that Xianxia learned about the full lineup of the production team. The female lead was confirmed to be Lin Ji, while the male lead was Hua Jin, a popular actor in ancient costumes. Lin Ji was a famous actress in ancient costumes, so there was no doubt that she would play the female lead. As for Hua Jin, being the most popular actor in ancient costumes, he was expected to play the male lead. At the press conference, Xianxia saw Hua Jin's real face for the first time. Because it was quite a distance away, Xianxia could only think of one word from that fleeting glance: charming all living things. He's too seductive. This man was too beautiful. This kind of beauty almost subverted the barriers between genders. Looking from afar, the palm-sized handsome face was as white as jade, with a pair of peach blossom eyes that were as charming as silk, and the corners of his eyes were long and narrow. The perfect lines of his facial features were like a sculpture made by the gods. Every detail was meticulously carved, extremely exquisite and beautiful. Qin Zhou had mentioned him before. This Hua Jin is the most popular young actor in ancient costumes nowadays. His background is not simple. So, you have to be careful. Stay away from him and don't get too close to him. Being crowned as the #1 scholar in ancient costumes was definitely not an undeserved reputation. Hua Jin's ancient costume was very charming and exuded the fragrance of ink. His face was like jade, his skin was like cream, his lips were red, and his teeth were white. His bearing was carefree, and he did not have the masculine spirit of an ordinary man. His temperament was gentle and elegant, and he was delicate and pretty. The adjectives of the 4 most beautiful men in ancient times did not seem out of place when applied to him. His body had a classical charm that made people unable to help but fall for him. It was said that Hua Jin was his stage name. However, no one knew his real name. Xianxia had always remembered Qin Zhou's advice. He said that Hua Jin's background was not simple and that she had to be careful when interacting with him. Chapter 1541. Hua Jin noticed this and couldn't help but glance at her thoughtfully. However, it was just a glance. Soon, he turned his gaze away and looked straight ahead. He didn't look at Yun Shishir again. However, there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. The first segment of the press conference was an interview with the main cast. Originally, such interviews were mainly for the male and female leads. However, during this period, due to Yun Shishir's popularity, Yun Shishir's limelight had once overshadowed Lin Ji and became the focus of attention. Some time ago, I heard that you negotiated an endorsement contract with the CEO of Louis Vuitton in China. Is this true? What do you think about acting in this gold-plated blockbuster? All the questions revolved around Yun Shishir. Lin Ji sat in her seat. As the female lead of this drama, she was unexpectedly neglected. She looked around the room and found that most of the cameras were focused on Yun Shishir. She felt even more annoyed. Yun Shishir's seat was lit by the flashing lights. She had a smile on her face and answered orderly. Her responses were quite satisfactory. Some of the questions were too sharp, but she was able to gloss over them with a few words. Not only did she give the media space to write, but she also gave them leeway. Her high EQ was undoubtedly displayed at this moment. Her on-the-spot responses were handled with ease. Qin Zhou wasn't present. He watched the live broadcast on his mobile phone and was quite satisfied with her performance. However, Lin Ji was a little dissatisfied. These reporters really didn't know their priorities. She was the backbone of the production. Yun Shishir was just a supporting actress. Why was she being paid so much attention? In order to be able to outshine all the other female stars at this press conference, she deliberately dressed up grandly. She was gorgeously dressed and had exquisite makeup. She wanted to win the attention of the audience at this interview. In the end, she was dressed so grandly, but the cameras were not focused on her. Wasn't this a little too much? What was wrong with the production team? Didn't they inform the media in advance? She was the female lead. The only female lead in this drama. Yun Shishir was just a supporting actress, a vicious supporting actress. Why was she receiving so much attention? The female lead was actually less popular than a supporting actress. This was too unreasonable. Lin Ji sat in her seat. Because of her anger, her whole body was stiff, as if she had been petrified. The lines on her shoulders were trembling faintly. Although she tried to force a smile on her face, the anger in her heart was surging more and more violently, and she was almost unable to suppress it. However, for the sake of the overall situation, she could only forcefully endure it. However, the displeasure in her eyes could not be concealed. As a result, when it was rare for the media to interview her, her attitude was quite unfriendly. Her tone was very harsh, and she even retorted with some sharp questions. As a result, the media was even more unwilling to interview her. On the other hand, Yun Shishir's ability to react quickly in the forest made the media more willing to interview her. Because of her interaction, the audience was laughing non-stop. Yun Shishir was someone who knew how to show off her burdens. Her answers were witty and humorous. She was not as coy and pretentious as other actresses. She was reserved and witty at the same time. The media was amazed. This Yun Shishir's EQ was too high. Chapter 1542. Halfway through the meeting, a media reporter suddenly raised his hand and asked a very difficult question. It said that Director Gu originally wanted to cast you as the female lead, but you ended up playing the supporting role. How do you explain this rumor? Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment. Lin Ji and everyone else present were stunned, except for Hua Jin. He looked at Yun Shishir, and a playful look appeared on his face, which was more exquisite and beautiful than a woman's. He rested his chin on his hand and looked at her meaningfully, secretly anticipating her response. Lin Ji also stared at Yun Shishir, wanting to see how she would answer this question. This question was very tricky. If she didn't answer well, both sides would offend each other. Yun Shishir pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, I discussed with Director Gu and decided on this role. As an actress, I definitely want to play a challenging role. I really want to try this character. I feel that this character has a lot of tension, and I also hope to conquer her. So, those rumors can be said to be false. The matter of me being the female lead is false. It's probably made up by someone with ulterior motives. As soon as this answer came out, the director and producer sitting beside her smiled knowingly, But Lin Ji secretly snorted. Yun Shirshir's answer didn't disappoint her. It seemed that she still had some sense of propriety. Hua Jin, on the other hand, lowered his eyelashes in disappointment. He pursed his lips, feeling bored. He originally thought that there would be a good show to watch. In the end, he didn't expect Yun Shirshir to be so obedient. How boring! After the press conference ended, the crew opened a WeChat group and invited the main cast to join. As soon as they joined the group, Hua Jin sent 10 red packets. Good luck with the filming. There was a neat line below. Thank you, Flower God. Thank you, boss. Flower God. This was Hua Jin's fan club's nickname for him. The first period drama he starred in was called Fu of the Flower God, and his stage name was Hua Jin. He was also a super popular period drama prince. Therefore, the fan group gave him the nickname Flower God. After leaving the venue, Yun Shirshir went to the bathroom. When she came out, she bumped into Hua Jin, who was standing at the door. Hua Jin was 182 meters tall, but his figure was a little slender. He had the delicate beauty of a classical handsome man. Yun Shirshir was 165 meters tall, and her height reached his neck. She didn't notice when she went out and bumped into his collarbone. Ugh! Yun Shirshir was shocked and took a step back. When she looked up and saw that it was him, her expression froze. Hua Jin, on the other hand, smiled as he sized her up. His eyes were like water, especially deep. At the same time, it frightened people's minds, and at the same time, his smile was extremely charming, making people feel numb to the bone. Looking at him up close, even though she was prepared, she was still shocked by his beauty. He was too beautiful. The 4 great handsome men in ancient times were probably just like him. He did not have Mu Yaja's regal aura, nor did he have Gu Xing's aloof demeanor. Instead, he had the elegance and grace of a classic handsome man, as well as a jade-like beauty. On his body, there was a feminine temperament that didn't belong to his gender. His face was like the mid-autumn moon, his hair was like a knife, his eyebrows were like ink, his eyes were like autumn waves, and his thin lips were like cherry blossoms, soft and beautiful. Chapter 1543. He was wearing a white shirt today and looked like a flawless jade statue. Even if he was just standing there quietly, he still looked handsome and charming, giving people a sense of nobility. However, that pair of eyes gave people an inexplicably unfriendly feeling. He looked at her with a smile and didn't say a word. It was as if he was sizing her up. The atmosphere was a little strange. Why are you here? She smiled awkwardly and exchanged pleasantries. Hua Jin still didn't say a word. He just looked at her as if he could see through her skin and bones, looking into the depths of her soul. This person was so strange. He blocked the door for no reason and then stared straight at her. She didn't know what he was trying to do. It was really baffling. I'm in a hurry to leave. Is it convenient for you to let me through? Yun Shirshir said in a friendly manner. Her tone was very polite. Hua Jin, however, remained unmoved. This person was so rude. Qin Zhou said that Hua Jin was especially difficult to get along with. Moreover, his background was not simple and he had a strong backing. Although she didn't know this person well, Qin Zhou definitely had his reasons for asking her to keep a distance from Hua Jin. Hence, she didn't want to exchange pleasantries with him. I'm sorry, I'll make a move first. After Yun Shirshir said that, she wanted to leave. She had just taken a step when Hua Jin moved his body slightly and blocked her way. Yun Shirshir frowned and changed her direction. Hua Jin pretended to be natural and leaned against the wall, blocking her way. She looked up in surprise but saw that he was still looking at her calmly with a smile. However, there was a playful look in his eyes, as if he was enjoying it. Is there anything you want? She asked. Hua Jin didn't respond and only shook his head slightly. Yun Shirshir was in a deadlock with him for a few seconds. Catching him off guard, he rushed out like an arrow leaving the bowstring. This time, Hua Jin did not stop her. Yun Shirshir looked back at him, only to see that he was still in the same position as before, not turning around. She inexplicably scolded him in her heart, then turned around and left. After she left, Hua Jin slowly turned around and looked in the direction she left. He raised his eyebrows and smiled enchantingly. This is fun. Mu Shi's car was waiting for her at the entrance of the underground parking lot. Yun Shishir hurriedly got into the car. Mu Shi, however, sensed that something was amiss with her expression. Glancing at her, she saw that the latter looked displeased and angry. "What's wrong, Shishir?" she asked nervously. "Did someone bully you?" Yun Shishir paused for a moment and then said angrily, "I just met a strange person." "Who is it?" "Hua Jin." When Yun Shishir said this name, a subtle expression appeared on Mu Shi's face. It was indescribable and gave people a strange feeling. It gave people the feeling that Mu Shi was in awe of him and also had a complicated admiration for him. "Hua Jin, what did he do to you?" "Nothing." Yun Shishir couldn't be bothered to say. "It's not a big deal. Let's not talk about unpleasant things. Don't be angry. Hua Jin is indeed not easy to get along with." Mu Shi comforted her. "He's not easy to get along with?" "Yes. Yes, his personality is very strange." "Why do you and Qinzhou say that?" Chapter 1544. That's because he's very arrogant and unpredictable. He does everything according to his temperament. He's also known for his vicious tongue, even more so than Qinzhou's. In that case, Yun Shishir raised a brow. With his personality, he'll be at a disadvantage in showbiz. Disadvantage? That's for others. Hua Jin won't. "What do you mean?" She explained, "That's because he has a strong backing." "How strong?" "In any case, he has a very strong backer, but we can't say who that backer is." She drove the car out of the car park. After paying the fare, she added, "Qinzhou wants you to keep a distance from him. He's probably afraid that you'll be banned if you get too close to him." "What do you mean?" "That backer of his isn't someone to be trifled with. If you must describe it, Shishir, have you seen the ancient poetry Queen's male pet?" "Male pet?" Yun Shishir furrowed her brows as realization dawned on her. She continued, "Hua Jin is that man who's favored by the Queen. He actually doesn't come from a good background, but with that backer backing him, no one dares to offend him. Those female stars who were involved in scandals with him in the past were all banned and disappeared without a trace. He was probably suppressed by the sugar daddy behind him. That's why Qinzhou told you not to get too close to him, lest you get targeted." Yun Shishir, there was such a thing. Actually, many popular artists have backers behind them. Some of them are obvious at a glance, while others you can't figure out, so you'll have to stay away from them. Generally speaking, the more mysterious the backer's identity is, the more complicated his background is. Most of them have connections with the government. The identity of Hua Jin's backer has always been a mystery. That's what Qinzhou's advice has its reasons. It was no wonder that Lin Ji, who loved to ride on people's coattails, would take a detour when she saw Hua Jin. Yun Shishir, however, shuddered. "Don't think too much. Once you're in the production team, you just have to be careful." Mu Shi comforted her with a smile. Yun Shishir nodded. When Hua Jin left the venue, a luxurious convertible sports car was parked in the parking lot, waiting quietly. He walked to the car door and knocked on the window. The window slowly lowered, revealing the face of a woman with exquisite makeup. "Are there any reporters behind you?" Hua Jin shook his head and smiled. "No." "Get in." Hua Jin opened the door and got into the car. Before he could fasten his seatbelt, the woman's figure stuck to him like a seductive snake spirit. She gently sucked on the corner of his lips and licked it with the tip of her tongue. "Jin, I haven't seen you for a few days. Did you miss me?" "I miss you too." The woman led his hand to her beautiful place. Hua Jin took the initiative to pull her into his arms and kiss her lips. After a passionate kiss, the woman leaned against his chest, panting, and asked in a low voice, "Do you have a job tonight?" "Nope." "Accompany me, okay?" "Hua Jin, aren't you going home tonight?" "I quarreled with my dad." The woman was a little angry. "He wants me to cut ties with you. How can I do that?" "Jin, I want to be with you for the rest of my life and never be separated." Hua Jin hugged her but did not say a word. Chapter 1545. How is that possible? Hua Jin raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. "Xiaoya, you are the most important person in my heart. No one can replace you." The woman's eyes suddenly became hot. She hugged him excitedly and gave him a deep French kiss. In the hotel, on the king-sized bed, Spring was enchanting. At the bedside, two hands were entwined with their fingers interlocked. Amidst the panting sounds, a woman's satisfied moans could be heard. The bedsheets were crumpled into a ball and were extremely messy. After making love, the sound of running water could be heard from the shower. Hua Jin sat at the head of the bed, holding a cigarette. Half of it was playing with it, and the other half was inhaling steadily. His eyes were staring blankly ahead. On his extremely beautiful face, there was laziness and carelessness after making love. Under his wet and messy hair, a pair of peach blossom eyes were slightly misty. In the lingering smoke, they gradually deepened. In the ashtray at the head of the bed, a few cigarette butts were stubbed out. The white bedding covered his naked body. He suddenly opened it and turned over to get out of bed. He put on a bathrobe and walked to the window. He slightly lifted a corner of the curtain and looked down at the night view of the city. In his mind, Yun Xirshi's sullen face suddenly flashed. Hua Jin felt that it was extremely interesting. He couldn't help but smile. This girl, inexplicably, felt very interesting. Suddenly, a woman's warm body pressed against his back. "Who are you thinking about?" Hua Jin retracted his thoughts and looked back slightly. The woman hugged him from behind with a coquettish expression. "I'm thinking about you." The woman's face was slightly shy. "Why are you so slow?" The woman's red lips moved and escaped. "I saw your press conference today." "Oh." His tone suddenly became cold. He said disapprovingly, "What's so good about the press conference?" When the woman mentioned the press conference, an inexplicable anxiety suddenly appeared on her face. "I saw that when the camera turned to you, you were staring at that woman, right?" Hua Jin asked knowingly, "Which woman?" "That's the one in white. She's called sure something. I don't even remember her name." Hua Jin remained silent, not saying a word. The woman felt a little wronged by his perfunctory attitude. She hugged him tightly and asked unhappily, "Between her and me, who's prettier? I've never seen you stare at me so affectionately." "Of course it's you." Hua Jin turned around, grabbed her chin and smiled wickedly. "No one can compare to you." The woman blushed and couldn't help but pout. "Jin, do you know? I love that mouth of yours. It's so sweet." When Hua Jin heard this, his smile deepened. "Do you know? I like your mouth too." Hua Jin bit her earlobe and said in an ambiguous voice, "Sometimes, you bite really hard." The woman wanted to say something but stopped herself. She was shy and coquettish. She pushed him, but there was a sweet smile on her face. Hua Jin held her in his arms. However, from an angle that she couldn't see, his enchanting eyes were slightly cold and indifferent. His face was no longer as passionate as before, but a little cold. There was a hint of weariness between his eyebrows. When Yun Xirshe returned home, she saw Yu and Xiao Yichen in the living room, tearing apart the package in full swing. She entered the house quietly, so the two little guys who were getting excited did not notice her. Chapter 1546. Yun Xirshe purposely kept quiet. She walked behind them and watched their every move quietly. Yu and Xiao Yichen did not notice the person behind them. They were still unpacking their packages. Some time ago, there was a shopping carnival on the online shopping website. Many items were greatly discounted and the prices dropped to freezing point. In a moment of carelessness, Yu ended up spending tens of thousands of yuan in his shopping cart. Yun Xirshe was now a popular public figure. Because of this, she rarely had the chance to take them out on the streets. Therefore, the two little guys took advantage of the shopping carnival and spent tens of thousands of yuan in front of the computer for the whole afternoon. Of course, they used Mu Yaja's credit card. Mu Yaja did not know about this. However, tens of thousands of yuan was just a small amount to him. Yu bought a lot of things. However, because of the carnival, many express delivery companies were out of stock. Therefore, the packages were delivered a week later than usual. Yu and Xiao Yichen had signed more than 80 packages from morning till night. More than 80 packages. Yu did not expect him to buy so many. He had suffered too much in the past. Therefore, even though he was young, he knew how to calculate carefully. When he saw that the price was right, he would place an order. When he signed for the packages, he was so tired that he almost vomited blood. At night, the two little guys sat in the living room and started to unpack the packages one by one. Yu had already unpacked a few packages. They were all clothes that he bought for himself and Xiaoyichen. The designs were exactly the same, but the sizes were different. Xiaoyichen tried them on and found that they fit perfectly. It was Xiaoyichen's first time shopping on the internet. He was as excited as a little bird. In his mind, if he wanted to buy something, he could just go to the Mu Group's shopping mall. If he wanted something, he could just take it and put it on the company's account. However, Yu's shopping experience was an eye-opener for him. How interesting! As he watched Yu haggle with the shop owner, Xiaoyichen felt as if he had opened the door to a whole new world. He felt that it was extremely novel, especially when Yu talked about something that made him feel inconceivable. He even started to feel sorry for the shop owner, but he still asked for a few gifts from the shop owner. He said sympathetically, You bargain too much. It's not easy for them to do business." Yu was dumbfounded. Xianxia watched quietly, feeling that the two little guys were really interesting. However, in the next second, her face stiffened, and her expression twitched. Yu virtuously picked up a bra and held it up high. "Xiaoyichen, does this look good?" Xiaoyichen was stunned. "Bra?" Yu raised her eyebrows and said, "Yes. I picked it for Mommy. What do you think of the design? It looks pretty good. Mommy hasn't shopped in a long time. She needs new underwear. That's why I picked a few for her." As Yu spoke, he picked up another bra while Xianxia was dumbfounded. "This one looks good too. The design is very reasonable. Mommy will definitely feel comfortable wearing it." Xiaoyichen pursed his lips and said honestly, "I don't know much about this." "What do you know?" Chapter 1547. Idiot Piggy. What else do you know other than eating, drinking, and sleeping? Yu picked up another lacy underwear. "I bought a lot of underwear for Mommy. I was afraid that she wouldn't like it, so I bought one of each design and let her take turns to change." Xiaoyichen suddenly scratched his head and whispered, "Still, I feel that Mommy will feel embarrassed if you buy so many underwear for her." Xianxia, who was behind him, was petrified. It was more than just embarrassment. It was simply too shameful. "If you don't say it, who will know?" Yu looked at him in disdain. He paused for a moment and then tidied up the stack of bras. "When the time comes, I'll secretly stuff these into the wardrobe. She'll definitely think that her assistant bought them for her. This way, she won't suspect me." She would follow Qinzhou's orders every week to buy clothes for Xianxia. From underwear to gowns, she would buy everything from the inside to the outside. Xiaoyichen picked up another bra, looked at it, and touched the material. The texture was soft. "Is there anything particular about the design you mentioned?" Yu frowned and said disdainfully, "Of course, there's something particular about it." "Tell me about it." Xiaoyichen propped his chin on his hand and looked at her, expressing his eagerness for knowledge. "The bras Mommy is wearing now have steel rims. I've done some research. For Mommy, it's best not to wear steel rims when wearing bras. It's uncomfortable and not good for your health. That's why I secretly threw away those bras with steel rims." Xianxia's eyes twitched hard the moment Yu finished speaking. How is this little guy so smart? He even knows about this. Indeed, the bras she was wearing recently had steel rims. Steel rims had the effect of gathering, so she had been buying them in bulk for her. However, the ones that were truly beneficial to her health were those that did not have steel rims and did not have a sense of pressure on her breasts. Indeed, the steel ring bra was very uncomfortable, and sometimes, when the steel ring was deformed, it would cause pressure on the outline of the asterisk. The little guy was so attentive. How did he even think of this point? Who could tell her how to accept this reality? Her son actually bought a bra for her. What was going on? While she was lost in the wind, Xiaoyichen grabbed another well-packaged item. She weighed it in her hands and realized that it was quite heavy. "What is this?" Xiaoyichen curiously looked at Yu with a heavy package in his hands. Yu looked up and glanced at the label. Suddenly she smiled slyly. "Dear brother, this is a present for you." As soon as he finished speaking, little Ichen's eyes lit up with a sound. After waiting for so long, Yu Yu's gift was finally here. Oh my God! His younger brother had secretly bought him a present. What could it be? Xiao Ichen curiously held the package in his hands. His face was full of excitement, and he could not bear to open it to take a look. Seeing how treasured he was, a deep smile appeared on Yu Yu's face as he stroked his head lovingly. "Do you like it?" "As long as it's from Yu Yu, I'll like it." "That's good then." Yu Yu was satisfied with his answer and then said, "Open it and take a look." Chapter 1548. Duang. Under Xiao Ichen's excited gaze, 10 extracurricular exercise books came into view. Wow, all of a sudden, it was as if ice water had poured over his head. All of his anticipation and enthusiasm were extinguished. The excitement in his eyes turned into ashes, as if 10,000 plants had withered. Xianxia wanted to laugh when she saw this scene, but she tried her best to hold it in. The conversation between the two little guys was too funny. She did not expect that Yu Yu would buy a stack of exercise books for Xiao Ichen. When she saw Xiao Ichen's disheartened face, she covered her mouth and tried her best not to laugh. Xiao Ichen was still immersed in the heavy blow. "What's this?" "This is my gift to you." Yu Yu patted his shoulder considerately. "You're going to primary school now. You must study hard and improve every day." These words extinguished all the excitement in his heart. "That's not fair," Xiao Ichen pouted and complained. "You gave mommy such a thoughtful gift, but why did you give me this?" Extracurricular exercise books? To him, they were like a nightmare. "Then what did you buy for daddy?" Yu Yu began to rummage through the pile of parcels. A few minutes later, Xianxia and Xiao Ichen were both stunned. Yu Yu opened the parcels and there was a pile of condoms in it. Xianxia was speechless. Xiao Ichen was speechless. Xianxia tried her best to control the raging emotions in her body. She clutched her chest as if she had suffered a heavy blow. "Komoda, Dule. So shameful. What are these?" Yu Yu, this was an eye-opener for her. Xiao Ichen did not understand what these items were. Yu Yu said as he organized the parcels, "Idiot, these are to protect mommy." "Protect mommy?" "Aya, you won't understand even if I tell you." Yu Yu was too lazy to talk to him. Why was this little fellow so curious? He asked this and asked that. He didn't have the patience to answer them one by one. However, Xiao Ichen refused to budge. "You, tell me. You know the most." Yu Yu said, "You wouldn't understand even if I told you. It's not suitable for children." "What do you mean by not suitable for children? I'm your brother. If you can understand it, why can't I?" Yu Yu said, "Do you know where you and I came from?" "Not really." Yu Yu mysteriously picked up a box and explained, "With this, mommy won't have a baby." Before Xianxia could react, Xiao Ichen, who was obsessed with his sister, was the first to stand up and strongly object. Yu Yu blinked blankly. Clearly, he did not understand why Xiao Ichen was so agitated. "Why are you so agitated?" Xiao Ichen muttered, "I want to have a sister. With this, I won't have a sister." "Idiot." Yu Yu also stood up agitatedly. "Do you know how painful it is to give birth to a baby? Don't tell me you want to watch mommy get tortured. Anyway, we're enough for mommy." He said this out of consideration for Xianxia. However, little Ichen was still so young. He did not know much about the matters between men and women. How could he understand the pain of a woman giving birth to a baby after 10 months of pregnancy? Chapter 1549. I don't care. I just want a younger sister. Yu Yu was speechless. He snorted and said, "I don't care what you say. I won't watch mommy suffer." A long time ago, he had seen a video about a woman who was pregnant for 10 months and went into the operating room to give birth. He was still young when he watched the video, but he was deeply frightened by the shocking reality of the scene. So, mommy went through such terrible torture when she gave birth to him? Some pregnant women even went through the gates of hell after giving birth to their babies. Yu Yu still had lingering fears after watching the video for a long time. His heart ached, he was sad, and he felt even more guilty towards Mommy. Hence, from then on, Yu was even more considerate towards Xianxia. He even loved her from the bottom of his heart. Because Mommy gave birth to him at the cost of her youth and pain, he had to dote on her even more. Xianxia did not understand. He looked at Yu in disdain and suddenly said meaningfully, I got it. What do you mean? You're obviously worried that Mommy will take away your love after giving birth to a younger sister. I'm just worried that you'll have a younger sister to compete with you for love. Xianxia suggested a conspiracy theory. Yu's eyes twitched. Compete for love. Isn't that so? Don't think that I don't know your good intentions. Xianxia said a rare phrase. Then he had an expression that said, I've already seen through you. Yu was speechless. He thought to himself, what nonsense is this guy saying again? Xianxia suddenly took out a few sewing needles from the side. These were the same sewing needles that Yu had used to sew the curtains. He picked up the needles and was about to poke the packaging of the condoms. But Yu was shocked when he saw this. He quickly snatched the sewing needles from his hand. What are you doing? I'm poking holes. Then I'll have a little sister. Xianxia cupped his face with both hands and said longingly. Yu was infuriated. He clenched his fists and waved them around. Then he threatened Xianxia, little brat, if you continue to cause trouble, I will beat you up. Xianxia snorted indignantly. Then, as if he had seen something behind Yu, his eyes widened in horror. He was so scared that his shoulders began to tremble. What happened? Yu said in surprise. All he did was threaten him, and he was scared to this extent? When did Muichin become so timid? Mom. Xianxia trembled as he spat out a few broken characters. The boy could not help but follow his line of sight and look behind him. Then, he saw Xianxia standing behind him. Her face was ashen. Yu, a sinister voice could be heard. It was obvious that a certain woman was very angry at this moment. Mommy, Yu swallowed with much difficulty and called out to her. Xianxia snorted coldly and frowned. Yu and Xianxia hugged each other in fear for warmth. Their teeth were chattering. Before they could dodge, Xianxia reached out and pinched each of them by their ears. Wah wah wah, bang. Chapter 1550. Tell me, who bought all these? She pointed at the pile of packages on the floor. Among them, the white Okamoto suit was the most eye-catching. The moment Xianxia pointed at the box of suits, Yu's face flushed red. He pursed his lips awkwardly. Little Ichen, on the other hand, discreetly pointed his finger at Yu, reminding his mother of the person who had bought these things. In any case, he wanted to shirk all responsibility. He tried his best to widen his eyes. Blinking pitifully, he looked at Xianxia innocently. His pure and clear eyes seemed to be telling her, Mommy, I'm really innocent. I didn't buy all these things. I didn't buy them. Yun Tianyu caught a glimpse of Xiaoyicheng's fingers secretly pointing at him. It was obvious that the latter was betraying him. He shot him a cold glance as if giving him a silent warning. Rather than calling it a warning, it was more appropriate to call it a threat. Sensing the coercion in his younger brother's eyes, little Ichen bit his pink lips. His outstretched little finger could not help but succumb to his tyrannical power. Feeling wronged, he curled it up and pitifully retracted it back into his sleeve. Xianxia took note of this little action. Although she was angry on the surface, she did not know whether to laugh or cry inside. These two little fellows, every time she was angry, they always had the ability to make her lose her temper easily. Yu actually knew how to threaten her older brother. This was not simple. Xianxia angrily asked, what did you buy all these things for? Daily necessities. Yu's face was obviously trying to curry favor with her. Mommy, I bought you a space capsule. You work so hard, but you can sit in it and have a massage when you come back. It's very comfortable. How much does the space capsule cost? Yu answered honestly, $30,000. He had bought the most luxurious space capsule, and the massage effect was very obvious. When he saw Xianxia coming back from Milan the last time, she was so tired that her waist and legs were sore. Especially when she was wearing high heels, Her feet were about to cramp. His heart ached. Yun Shirshi's eyes widened when she heard that a space capsule cost 30,000 yuan. 30,000 yuan. So expensive. You're such a prodigal. Yun Shirshir complained with heartache. Even if she were to rush for a job, it would still cost her 30,000 yuan. Upon hearing this, Yu felt hurt. She clutched her chest sadly as if she had been hurt by Yun Shirshir's words. Mommy, how could you say that Yu is a prodigal? How was he squandering? To him, 30,000 yuan was not even worth mentioning. So sad. Mommy actually called him a wastrel? Yu pretended to wipe her tears sadly. When Yun Shirshir saw this, the corners of her mouth twitched violently. She felt that she was the one at fault. Actually, she did not feel bad about the 30,000 yuan. It was just that she felt that it was not good for Yu to be so extravagant at such a young age. At such a young age, the child should be taught the correct concept of spending and not be so extravagant. She had to let the child understand that earning money was a very difficult thing, so that he would cherish the fruits of his labor. Hence, Yun Shirshir calmly and patiently guided her child. Do you know? It's very hard to earn money. Was it very hard to earn money? Yu tilted her head in confusion. Clearly, she could not empathize with Yun Shirshir's words. Chapter 1551. Yu explained, Yu didn't buy random things. Yun Shirshir was speechless. Everything Yu buys is useful. Yun Shirshir thought of the bras and underwear, as well as the condoms he bought, and the corners of her mouth twitched. However, Yu's words suddenly rang in her ears. Do you know how painful it is to give birth to a baby? Don't tell me you want to watch mommy get tortured? Anyway, we're enough for mommy. If you're like mommy, it's best not to wear underwear. It's uncomfortable and not good for your health. She couldn't get angry anymore. No matter what, this little guy was still thinking about her. Although her son had secretly bought her underwear and condoms, which was indeed shameful, but the child's intention was for her sake. Yun Shirshir sighed and frowned slightly. This time, mommy forgives you. Yun Shirshir bit her red lips and said shyly with difficulty, Mommy can buy these things. Yu smiled and opened his arms to pounce on Yun Shirshir. He rubbed against her arms and said intimately, Yu knows that mommy won't be angry. Don't do it again. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but remind him. Yu nodded and said softly, okay. He would do whatever mommy said. But mommy works so hard, you have to be more considerate of yourself. Yu is so worried because mommy doesn't know how to take care of herself. Yun Shirshir patted his head and kissed his forehead. Mommy knows. You're only 7 years old. Why do you like to nag like an old man? Yu's face immediately turned red. Feeling wronged, she mumbled, Mommy actually said that Yu looks like a little old man. Behind him, Xiao Yichen covered his mouth and burst out laughing. When Yu heard Xiao Yichen's mocking laughter, she turned around and glanced at him coldly. Xiao Yichen could no longer laugh. Yun Shirshir flicked Yu's forehead. Don't bully your brother. Alright. Yu knows. Evening. When Mu Yaja returned, dinner was already prepared. Tonight, Yun Shirshir and Yu prepared dinner together. Yu had bought an oven, so he specially baked a cheesecake tonight. When the cake was served, little Yichen, who was sprawled on the dining table, was almost drooling from the craving. After dinner, the family went out for a walk. After returning from the walk, Yun Shirshir accompanied the two little guys to watch TV for a while. Then she coaxed them to sleep. When she returned to the bedroom, she saw Mu Yaja holding a Okamoto set in a daze. When Yun Shirshir saw this, her face immediately turned red. In addition to the condoms, there were sex toys included in the Okamoto set as well. Yu had previously asked the store to give more gifts. The store was kind enough to give these to him. Yun Shirshir didn't open it to take a look. When Mu Yaja returned to the bedroom, he saw that there was such a thing in the drawer that wasn't closed. He took it out and opened it. To his surprise, he saw that it was a sex toy. When he saw her, Mu Yaja raised his head. There was a mischievous and playful look in his eyes. It was obvious that he had an unfathomable look. You bought this? Chapter 1552. Yun Shirshir was so embarrassed that she immediately rushed forward, wanting to snatch this embarrassing thing away. However, Mu Yaja avoided her with a backhand. Caught off guard, she bumped into his arms. "Hey!" She looked up and glared at him a little angrily. However, she saw Mu Yaja looking down at her with a hint of speculation in his eyes. "You've already bought it. Why are you still hiding it?" Yun Shirshir felt extremely wronged. It looked like she was going to be accused of this crime. She didn't want to be the scapegoat. Yun Shirshir said aggrievedly, "I really didn't buy it." "If you didn't buy it, who else could it be?" I bought the wrong one. Can't I?" As Yun Shirshir explained, she glared at him. "I clearly put it in the drawer. Did you go through my drawer?" Mu Yaja corrected her sternly. "Miss Yun, pay attention to your words. This bedside table is mine. Are you hinting at me by putting this thing here?" It was a 2-meter-long bed. On the left side was Mu Yaja's bedside table. Usually he would put his watch and phone on it. Today, Yun Shirshir had been in a hurry, so she stuffed the box directly into the cabinet. When Mu Yaja came back, he saw it when he opened the cabinet to take out the charger. When he first saw it, he was shocked. Why would this stupid woman buy a condom set? However, when he opened it, he was even more stunned. There were actually sex toys inside, and they were especially realistic. A certain man's thoughts went astray. He looked askance at her with a devilishly charming smile. The teasing look in his eyes made her want to dig a hole in the ground and bury her burning face deep in it. "Stupid woman, are you hinting at me?" Yun Shirshir lowered her head, not daring to look at his teasing gaze. However, she heard him say something indecent in a very serious tone. "Could it be that I'm not enough for you, so you want to borrow?" His thin lips were right next to her ear. His breath smelled like orchids, and his warm breath blew into her ear, causing her face to turn red and her heart to beat faster. "Shut up." Yun Shirshir flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Hey, can you be a little more serious? Isn't this serious enough?" Mu Yaja, however, did not agree. He hugged her and began to bully her even more ambiguously. "You haven't seen my indecent side yet. Do you want to see it?" "No, I don't want to," she answered without thinking. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a mischievous smile. "So cold. I thought you would be looking forward to it." "Hey!" He actually dared to tease her. This man was getting worse and worse. Yun Shirshir was angry and embarrassed, but she saw Mu Yaja looking at her expectantly. "Since you've already bought the product, why don't you try it and see what effect it has?" "No need." "Are you being shy?" Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. He liked the shy expression on her face when he teased her. The more he looked at it, the more he found it interesting. "You stop fooling around." Yun Shirshir frowned, but Mu Yaja could not help but hug her and sit her on his body, coaxing her. "Okay, I won't tease you anymore." He would not tease her anymore. Chapter 1553. Once he kissed her, he couldn't bear to leave. She was so beautiful that he didn't know what was going on. The room was filled with tenderness and love. For the next few days, Yun Shirshir's schedule was packed to the brim. First, there was the grand opening ceremony of Lethal Beauty. Yun Shirshir and the main cast and crew attended the ceremony. Before the ceremony ended, they left the venue in a hurry and boarded a plane to Paris. After the first episode of The Love Diary was aired, the response was very strong. Without a doubt, it became the #1 show in the Golden Entertainment ratings. The production team promoted the Lucky Couple brand. On Tieba and forums, the number of discussions about the Lucky Couple increased rapidly. Yun Shirshir became popular. Although she had been popular for a while due to the promotion of The Green Apple, after the broadcast of The Love Diary, her popularity rose to a considerable level and attracted the attention of everyone. Yun Shirshir's team, on the other hand, was even more relentless in their promotion efforts. Hence, the script for the second episode was changed at the last minute. The production team spent a huge amount of money to draft a new script, and the entire team flew to Paris for the recording. Before the recording, they released a notice on Weibo that the Lucky Couple would be having a sweet time in Paris. The fans of the Lucky Couple were looking forward to it. Actually, After the first episode was aired, many die-hard fans of Gu Xingze went to Yun Shishir's Weibo to shout insults. However, most of the fans maintained a rational attitude and were more upright. They knew that this was just a reality show and they were just there to watch it. They didn't take it too seriously. Even the younger fans were turned into fans by Yun Shishir's good looks. She was too beautiful. In the first episode, Yun Shishir won a lot of praise with her clear and fashionable makeup and flawless outfit. Moreover, she was a newcomer and didn't have any dark history. Hence, even if someone wanted to defame her, they couldn't do it. Even the production team did not expect that the first episode of the show would achieve such unprecedented viewership ratings. After this episode, more producers took notice of Yun Shishir, a newcomer with a strong momentum. She had just debuted and she was already so popular. Therefore, many film crews and advertisers approached Qin Zhou and began to discuss cooperation. Qin Zhou had received a lot of endorsements for Yun Shishir, and his hands were about to go limp. However, there weren't many offers. Most of them were cameos or supporting roles. The main reason was that there weren't any good scripts. What time was it now? It was the off-season in the entertainment industry. There were no good scripts. Qin Zhou restrained himself. If there were no good scripts, he would not accept them. After all, there were very few good scripts like The Green Apple and Lethal Beauty. Only a few books were published in a year. As soon as the plane landed, Yun Shishir ran to the airport and threw up all over the place. There was no other reason. She had boarded the plane on an empty stomach. Then, she ate some bread on the plane and felt very uncomfortable in her stomach. When the plane landed, it was extremely unstable and she was dizzy. She endured it until she reached the ground. When she reached the washroom, she could no longer hold it in and vomited until tears flowed out. He was too tired. She hurriedly followed her in and gave her wet wipes. When she came out after cleaning herself up, Qin Zhou got a fright. Shishir, what's wrong? It's nothing. Yun Shishir coughed dryly and explained, maybe I ate bread on the plane and then my stomach felt uncomfortable.